Chapter 236. He Yan was the real General Fei Hong. If the evidence that Xiao Ju had handed over just now was just evidence on paper, it was still suspicious. Now that this woman had personally come out to confirm it, it was a real nail in the coffin. He Yan looked at Madame He in a daze. She had never seen Madame He speak so fiercely. She also never expected that one day, she would hear the words "I'm her daughter." At this moment, Madame He was like any other ordinary mother, screaming for justice for her own child. But why was she here? Xiao Ju also looked at Madame He with a frown. He had promised to make a deal with Madame He to protect He Xining, but Madame He didn't tell Cui Luo what she wanted to do. Xiao Ju didn't know how Madame He came here, nor did he know what she wanted to do. But when he saw Madame He's pale face, he immediately had a bad premonition. "Don't listen to this bitch's nonsense, Your Majesty," He Rufei anxiously said. "She's so sick that she can't think clearly. She's just talking nonsense." "I'm not talking nonsense." Madame He suddenly coughed violently, and a trace of black blood flowed out of the corner of her mouth. He Yan's heart tightened, and her whole body turned cold. She wanted to go forward, but the woman acted as if she didn't see her. Ignoring the blood on the corner of her mouth, she said loudly, "I'm not lying. The He family is afraid that I'll tell the truth, so they've been poisoning me every day. I know that I don't have much time left, so I don't want the truth of my daughter's death to be buried." "Your Majesty!" Her voice was miserable, like the cry of a dying beast. "People speak the truth when they're about to die. I'm telling the truth. If there's any deceit, I'll be struck by lightning and die a horrible death. After I die, I'll go to the 18th level of hell and never be reincarnated." The oath was vicious and severe, but what was even more shocking was her mournful expression. More and more blood gushed out from the corners of Madame He's mouth, and it was almost out of control. Lin Shuanghe wanted to rush out to check but was stopped by Lin Mu, who gently shook his head at him. "It's hopeless." Madame He shouted, "Your Majesty, please make a decision for this official's daughter. Your Majesty, please make a decision for General Fei Hong." After saying this, she seemed to finally be unable to support herself and her entire body went limp. Xiao Ju, who was standing not far from him, instinctively reached out to support him. Madame He looked at Xiao Ju. The young man in front of her was the dream man of De Wei's countless daughters, General Feng. She once saw the scene of this man walking side by side with his fiancée at Yuhua Temple. The legendary cold and arrogant second young master Xiao was actually incredibly gentle when he faced the Yan Yan's girl. He was different from Su Zhiheng, He Rufei, and all the other men who used to deceive their wives. If He Yan was handed over to him, she should be relieved. Her daughter, He Yan. Madame He's eyes were moist. She knew that He Yan was standing in the distance and looking at her. That was her daughter. Even though He Yan was a completely different person, even though He Yan's blood was no longer flowing in his body, even though she and her daughter rarely interacted with each other in their previous lives and were like strangers, when He Yan stood in front of her and nodded with a smile, politely calling her Madame He, she could recognize her at a glance. He Yan was fond of sweets. When he ate, he would always hold his chopsticks in the upper half of his mouth. When he encountered something he didn't like, he would pile it up to the edge of his bowl. But in the end, he would still eat it obediently. She saw the girl eating at Yuhua Temple and instantly understood something. There was some kind of connection between a mother and a daughter. Military Governor Xiao. She took a deep breath and looked at the young man in front of her with hope in her eyes. She is He Yan. Xiao Ju whispered. In an instant, Madame He's heart was filled with great satisfaction. She said, "Good. Perhaps the heavens saw that her daughter was too pitiful. She grew up all alone, deceived, poisoned, and killed. She was no longer around, yet she was still being used to complete the He family's and Su family's good reputation of having a deep relationship. How much she hated, how powerless she was. Many nights, she looked at the white silk hanging on the beam of the house. She was only one step away from being free and going to hell to atone for her sins. But every time at the last moment, when she thought of He Xining, she had the thought of retreating. What could she do? She could only live like a walking corpse. She didn't know if it was because even the heavens pitied her that she was able to see He Yen again in her lifetime. When she saw He Yen for the first time, when she understood that He Yen wanted revenge and wanted to overthrow He Rufei, Madame He decided that even if she had to sacrifice her life, she would help He Yen achieve his goal. She knew her own body best. Since He Yen died, she was only left with one last breath. She knew that Cui Luo was sent by Xiaoju. She also knew that Xiaoju might know a lot of the truth. She was willing to use her own life to be the last nail. She took the poison and secretly climbed out of the dog hole that He Yen dug when he was young. He Yen probably wouldn't know for the rest of his life that when she climbed out of the dog hole every morning, Madame He saw it all. He Yen thought that Madame He didn't care about her, but in fact, she had been watching her daughter in the dark for so many years. She saw her wearing a mask and playing by herself in the courtyard. She saw her being depressed after being scolded by Madame He. She saw her looking at her with a gaze that changed from admiration to calmness. She saw her putting away all her original self and pretending to be someone else. There were countless times when Madame He tossed and turned in bed at night. If she hadn't watched silently at that time, but had been nicer to He Yen, and let He Yen feel a moment of warmth, perhaps He Yen would have at least a moment of nostalgia and warmth when he reminisced about his life. Instead of dying in the cold pool and being the victim of a conspiracy for the rest of his life. Don't tell her. I know who she is. She struggled to open her mouth and blood gushed out from the corner of her mouth. But Xiaoju stared at the woman in front of her and felt that she had returned to the day when Madame Xiao left. The heart-wrenching pain was something that those who suffered would never want to experience again. He had tasted the pain before. He didn't expect that He Yen would have to walk the same path as him today. How cruel. Just let her hate me. Madame He's eyes were filled with laughter and tears. I didn't do anything, just let her hate me. In front of Cui Luo, she never mentioned He Yen. Instead, she frequently mentioned He Xining. Even when she made a deal with Xiaoju, she only cared about He Xining's life. She knew that Xiaoju would be able to see and hear all of this. She knew that Xiaoju was someone who valued friendship and loyalty. Perhaps he was the only person in the world who treated He Yen with sincerity. The more biased she was, the more Xiaoju would feel sorry for He Yen. The brave and invincible general on the battlefield didn't understand the delicate tricks of a woman in the backyard. She wanted to use this trick to scheme against Xiaoju, to scheme against him so that he would do his best to treat He Yen well. This was the last thing she could do for He Yen. Xiaoju stared at the woman in front of him. After pausing for a moment, he finally couldn't help but say, "She has never hated you." Madame He was stunned. In an instant, the world fell silent. Only the words of the man in front of her filled her ears. She didn't have much strength left. Even turning her head was difficult. She could only move her eyes slightly to look at the person she wanted to see but didn't dare to. She wanted to see the person she was most sorry to in her life. However, her eyes were blurred. She couldn't see the person clearly. She could only see a blurry figure standing in the square. He was tall and handsome. He was as beautiful as a painting. She suddenly remembered the day when she was diagnosed with pregnancy. At that time, He Yuanliang was very happy and asked the doctor to take a look. The doctor looked at her belly and said mysteriously, "A general is the best. If the days are the same, his life will be prosperous. He has a noble position and is suitable for the world to reward him. Madame's belly is a rare general. If it's a boy, he will definitely rise to the top. If it's a girl, the family won't be peaceful." He Yuanliang asked people to make a lot of clothes for boys. However, Madame He inexplicably felt that the child in her belly must be a little girl. Although He Yen was a girl, he had been a man for so many years. In Yu Hua Temple, the mother and daughter met again. However, they were like strangers. Madame He endured the huge waves in her heart and asked the woman in front of her, "Miss He, why do you call He Yen?" The girl smiled carelessly and replied casually, "Who knows? Ordinary girls don't have the word yen. The river is clear and the sea is filled with yen. Perhaps my parents knew when I was born that I would have to go to the battlefield to protect the safety of the people." Madame He's tears finally fell. She murmured, Yen Yen by the lotus, but can't be carried. She had never thought of letting He Yen go to the battlefield and make a name for herself. As a mother, her initial wish was for He Yen to be a beautiful and carefree little girl. However, this initial wish had unknowingly deviated from the absurd. The tears on her face had not dried yet, but her clenched fists had already loosened. The woman's last breath dissipated, and her life ended like this. Xiao Ju was shocked and subconsciously looked back to find the figure. Beside He Rufei, He Yen stood there in a daze. Her eyes fell on Madame He, who was in his arms. She didn't know what Madame He and Xiao Ju said. Their voices were too soft and the wind was too strong. She could only see that Madame He seemed to look at her. What was she looking at? Hien of Markun, or Hien of Second Miss He? Qing Lang was back in her hands, but He Yen didn't have a trace of joy in her heart. She just stared at the woman in Xiao Ju's arms. She couldn't wait to rush over, but she couldn't. She couldn't move in front of everyone's eyes. She would be suspected. She was now Marquis Wu and He Yen. She had nothing to do with the He family. If she stepped forward now, she didn't know what kind of consequences it would bring. Xiao Ju turned her head and gently put the woman's body back on the ground. She looked at Emperor Wenxian and said, "Your Majesty, Madam He used her life to prove that He Rufei deceived the Emperor. He Rufei falsely claimed the merit, and the He family deceived the Emperor. Such a rebellious person should be executed. I hope that Your Majesty will punish the sinners severely and not tolerate them." "Your Majesty," He Rufei said in panic, "this official is innocent." "Your Majesty," Su Zhiheng also complained loudly, "this official was forced. He Rufei did these things. This official has nothing to do with this official. This official is also a victim. I don't know anything." Emperor Wenxian frowned. He had a terrible headache. He said in a deep voice, "Someone come, take He Rufei and Su Zhiheng away. Confiscate the He and Su families." He wanted to settle the score. The fourth Prince Guang Shua's heart moved. He stepped forward and said, "Imperial Father, that Prime Minister Su, he didn't forget about Prime Minister Su. Su Zhiheng and He Rufei weren't as important as Su Jingfu. It wasn't easy for Xiao Ju to create such an opportunity. If he couldn't use this opportunity to shake Prime Minister Su's position, it would be too difficult for him to have such an opportunity in the future." Su Jingfu's face was extremely ugly. At this time, He Rufei couldn't be saved. If Madame He didn't come out, he could slowly make plans later. However, not only did Madame He appear, she also testified with her life. He knew Emperor Wenxian too well. Emperor Wenxian's pity for Madame He would catalyze his anger towards the He and Su families. Even he would suffer a calamity. "Your Majesty, this old official is loyal to Your Majesty. Your Majesty, please investigate." Su Jingfu looked at Emperor Wenxian with a magnanimous gaze. If it was in the past, Emperor Wenxian would feel that he was being overbearing. Now, as long as he thought of the 3 letters presented by Xiao Huaijin and looked at Su Jingfu's attitude, he felt disgusted. He said expressionlessly, "Lock him in the prison and wait for trial." The fourth prince was overjoyed. The crown prince looked a little flustered. Of course, he didn't want this to happen. However, looking at the current situation, it was clear that Xiao Huaijin came prepared today. Even Su Jingfu himself didn't expect this. No one knew how much evidence Xiao Ju had in his hands. One after another, he was afraid that they had been preparing for this day for a long time. Since this was the case, it was better to wait and see. When Xiao Huaijin used up all his trump cards, he would think of a way to deal with the aftermath. The Guangyan didn't say anything. He Rufei and Su Zhiheng were both taken away. Su Jingfu couldn't let himself be in such a sorry state like the two of them. He adjusted his collar and said lightly, "This old official will leave by himself." When he passed by Chu Zhao not far away, Su Jingfu glanced at Chu Zhao. Chu Zhao lowered his eyes and stood in the crowd of civil officials. Su Jingfu felt a little relieved. He couldn't count on that idiot Guang Yan to make a move outside. Fortunately, there was still Chu Zhao. Chu Zhao was meticulous and had followed him for so many years. With him outside, the situation wouldn't be too bad. However, he didn't expect that Xiao Huaijin would use He Rufei to deal with him. In this round, he had underestimated Xiao Ju. As for the envoys from Wu Tuo, Xiao Ju glanced at them and said, "Today's incident on the Heavenly Star platform happened suddenly. For the next few days, the envoys can stay in Shuojing City. Once this matter is settled, we can make plans for the future." He turned to Emperor Wenshuan and asked, "What does your Majesty think?" Emperor Wenshuan's mind was in a mess and he was exhausted. He waved his hand and said, "We'll do as you say." Ma Ningbu's expression changed. He realized that even they couldn't leave now. Xiao Huijin was really something. Everyone knew that his opponent was Su Jingfu, but he just had to target He Rufei. After today, not only would the He and Su families be in trouble, but even Su Jingfu would be in trouble in the future. Sometimes, in a game of chess, it was a contest of 1 or 2 chess pieces. Su Jingfu was fine, but He Rufei's agreement to fight with Hua Yuan had been leaked. Not to mention opening a market, even the peace negotiations would be difficult. As a result, the advantage that Wu Tuo Kingdom had fought so hard for would be gone. It would be hard to guarantee that they wouldn't fall short of success in the future. However, people had to lower their heads when they were under someone else's roof. This wasn't a good time for a direct confrontation, so Ma Ningbu smiled and said, "Of course. Your Majesty." Xiao Ju stepped forward and lowered his voice. Although Madam He is also a member of the He family, she took the initiative to expose the He family's scam today and didn't hesitate to risk her life. Seeing that the real General Fei Hong once fought for the Dawei and bathed in blood on the battlefield, I ask your Majesty to allow this humble subject to bury Madam He's corpse. Military Governor Xiao, isn't this a bit inappropriate? The Crown Prince frowned and said, "No matter what, she knew about it and committed the crime of deceiving the Emperor. How can you plead for mercy for a criminal? She is General Fei Hong's birth mother." Xiao Ju looked at him with a sharp gaze. "Forgive and forget, Your Highness." The Crown Prince coughed lightly and didn't say anything. Emperor Wenxian had already stood up with the help of his eunuchs. When he heard this, he glanced at the dead woman on the ground and felt a trace of sympathy in his heart. A mother who didn't hesitate to give up her own life for the sake of her dead daughter was truly pitiful. Moreover, she was already dead. Forget it, he couldn't be bothered to care about this anymore. He said, "Permitted." Xiao Ju heaved a sigh of relief. Today's banquet on the Heavenly Star platform wasn't the least bit joyful. Those who died died and those who were captured were captured. It also allowed people to clearly see a great injustice from many years ago. Who would have thought that the General Fei Hong who wore a mask on the battlefield was actually a different person from the widely loved General Fei Hong who later became an official of the same court? And that legendary woman died so miserably. It was especially ironic when she put it together with her own experience. The ground was scattered with blood and weapons. After the Emperor and the nobles left, the Heavenly Star platform was a mess. The wind seemed to be whimpering, making people's eyes sore. Xiao Ju turned around and saw He Yen slowly, step by step, walking towards Madame He's body. She walked extremely slowly, as if every step took a lot of energy. Her face was pale, like a lost traveler who couldn't find her home and was about to get lost in the desert. Xiao Ju called her softly, "He Yen." He Yen didn't feel anything. She stared at the woman on the ground. She walked in front of Madame He's body and wanted to touch her hand with her trembling hand. Just as she reached out, she retracted her hand. The woman's eyes were already closed, but the corners of her mouth were slightly curved, as if she was smiling, but there was some bitterness in it. This was the first time she saw her mother so closely. In the past years, she could only look at her from afar and couldn't look at her for too long. Otherwise, if Madame He found out, she would be reprimanded again. She wanted to call her mother, but she knew that even if she did, she wouldn't get a response. Her heart suddenly hurt. It was so fierce that it almost suffocated her. He Yen suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Xiao Ju said, "He Yen." She softly fell to the ground. On the other side, Lin Shuanghe noticed the movement here and hurriedly ran over. When he saw the blood on He Yan's lips, he was shocked. "Sister He, what happened? Did you get an internal injury when you fought with He Rufei? What should we do? What should we do?" Xiao Ju carried He Yen from the ground and said to him, "Come with me." Then she ordered her subordinates, Take care of Madame He's body. Wait for me to come back. Lin Shuanghe was worried about He Yan's injury, so he didn't say anything and followed Xiao Ju into the carriage. Their movements fell into the eyes of the others. Chu Zhao was slightly startled. His gaze followed Xiao Ju's back. He seemed to want to follow, but a voice sounded in his ear. Now that Prime Minister Su is in trouble, fourth young master, we have to find a way to save him. In a flash, Chu Zhao's emotions disappeared. When he looked at the person in front of him again, there was a trace of worry in his voice. That's how it should be. His colleague next to him poked Yan He's arm and asked, Yan He, why are you standing there in a daze? After a long time, Yan He came back to his senses and shook his head. Nothing. He looked around and didn't see Xiao Ju. He asked, Where's Xiao Huijin? Where is Xiao Huijin? Just now, Marquis Wuan vomited blood. Maybe he got injured when he fought with He Rufei. That person replied honestly. Military Governor Xiao took Marquis Wuan and left. Young Master Lin also left. He probably went to treat his injury. I was wondering why General Fei Hong was so weak that he couldn't even defeat a young girl. It turns out that he wasn't the real General Fei Hong. What's wrong with being a girl? Yan He looked at the sky and said in a low voice, General Fei Hong himself was originally a girl. His colleague was at a loss for words. After a long time he said, That's true. It would be great if such a wonderful girl was still alive. Unfortunately, beautiful women have short lives. In the past, I didn't even see what Su Zhiheng's wife looked like. If I had seen her, I wouldn't be able to talk about her. The one I saw was General Fei Hong. That's right, Nen Guang. He thought of something and asked Yan He, when you were studying at the Xianchang Pavilion, weren't you classmates with General Fei Hong? At that time, she should have been the real General Fei Hong. What kind of person was she? She was a girl. Although she wore a mask, didn't you guys notice anything wrong? No, Yan He said. What? He thought of the youth who got up in the middle of the night and secretly practiced swordsmanship in the bamboo forest in the backyard. Rain or shine couldn't stop him. He practiced strenuously but stubbornly. At first, he thought that it was useless. Now that he thought about it, he was the one who was short-sighted. None of the youths discovered young Master He's identity. It wasn't because they were careless. It was because she had abandoned her female self. She did it better than a man, Yan He replied. Chapter 237. When Xiao Ju carried He Yan back to the He residence, He Yunxing and He Sui were not there. Only Qing Mei was there. Seeing the pale face of He Yan in Xiao Ju's arms, Qing Mei jumped in fright. Oh my God, what happened to Miss? It's nothing. Lin Shuanghe was afraid that she would be anxious and said, Today, I had a duel with someone at the Heavenly Star stage, so I'm a little tired. You are? I'm a doctor, Lin Shuanghe smiled. I'm here to treat your Mississippi. Xiao Ju carried He Yan into the room and placed him on the bed. Lin Shuanghe did not dare to delay and first checked He Yan's pulse. After a while, Lin Shuanghe said, Sister, he is suffering from depression. In a moment of desperation, she vomited blood. I'll write 2 prescriptions. You can ask your servants to prepare the medicine for her to drink. But what? Lin Shuanghe sighed. This is a psychological problem. Medicine can only treat the symptoms but not the root cause. Why is Sister He so distressed? I don't think she's a calculative person. Why would she vomit blood? Xiao Ju did not say anything. You guys really scared me today. Lin Shuanghe looked at the 2 swords that Xiao Ju had placed on the table. Why did you attack just like that? He Rufei's matter, I haven't figured it out yet. When I figure it out, I'll ask you again. As for Prime Minister Su, are you confident? After waiting for so many years, Xiao Ju had not made a move. This time, since she made a move against Prime Minister Su, she was prepared to do it for real. A centipede dies but never falls down. If she did not seize this opportunity to completely defeat Prime Minister Su, she would not have another chance like this. Don't worry, Xiao Ju's eyes were cold. I sent him in and did not want him to come out. What do we do now? Lin Shuanghe asked. The palace must be in chaos right now. The relationship between His Majesty and Prime Minister Su isn't something the 2 of us can match. Do you want to go to the palace now? What if Su Dang seizes the opportunity and the emperor's heart softens? Wait a little longer, Xiao Ju said. Wait for what? Xiao Ju's gaze fell on He Yen, who was lying on the couch. She walked to the couch and sat down. Let's wait for He Yen to wake up. At this moment, the He family in the capital was completely blocked off by the soldiers who had come to their door. He Yuanxing's face was ashen as he pretended to be calm and said, "How dare you? My son is the General Fei Hong who was appointed by His Majesty. How dare you behave so atrociously here?" What General Fei Hong? The leader sneered and said, "You're just a swindler who gained fame by deceiving the world. How dare you boast shamelessly here? If you want to be a general, do it in prison. Do it." Madam, he struggled desperately and shouted, "What are you doing? Stop, let me go." However, He Yuanxing's heart turned cold as a terrifying thought appeared in his mind. But he still had a glimmer of hope. He looked at the soldier and asked, "What is the meaning of this? Today on the Heavenly Star platform, your family's eldest son had a sword duel with someone and was exposed." One of the soldiers who was smashing the signboard of the He family kindly reminded him, "There are witnesses and material evidence. His Majesty already knew that your He family had stolen the dragon from the phoenix and deceived the emperor. Master He, you don't have to dream of being the father of a general here." The soldier kicked open the door and saw He Yuanliang. He Yuanliang was hiding under the bed and was trying his best to squeeze in, trying not to be discovered. However, his body was round and smooth, so even if he tried to squeeze in, half of his body was exposed. When he was pulled out, He Yuanliang desperately begged for mercy. "Sir, please spare me. They forced me." He pointed at He Yuanxing. "How could I harm my own daughter? My daughter, He Yen, also went to the battlefield to protect the people. For my daughter's sake, please spare me." The soldiers looked at this person and felt that it was quite interesting. They originally thought that a person who could raise a woman like He Yen who disguised herself as a man and went to the battlefield was not a simple person. First, they saw Madame He die on the Heavenly Star platform to prove herself. She also had some strength of character. Why was her biological father so weak? People looked down on him. It was said that like father, like daughter. This father and daughter were not similar at all. Second, old Master He, you'd better save your words for General He. Moreover, this is not the only crime that your family's eldest son has committed. Not the only crime. Madam He was stunned. What else? Colluding with the enemy and committing treason. There was some disdain in the soldier's eyes. In order to not expose his identity, Master He personally conspired with the Yuto in private. In the Battle of Huayuan, tens of thousands of soldiers became his human shields to protect him. You want to be spared for such a serious crime? Dream on. Take him away. Madam He cried and shouted, "Impossible, impossible. This is absolutely impossible." He Yuanxing was in a daze and did not say another word. Once the crime of colluding with the enemy and committing treason was exposed, 9 generations of the family would be executed. Even if Emperor Wen Xian was merciful, he would not let it go. Moreover, he was already dead. After the truth was revealed, even if He Yen died, he would still have a clean reputation. However, the He family, even after death, would have a bad reputation. He Yuanliang's pleas for mercy were particularly loud in the courtyard, but it was useless. The He family's plaque that had been polished until it was shiny was thrown on the ground and stepped on by the soldiers. The common people across the street looked at it from afar and pointed at it. The sound of the wind blurred the discussion into smoke and dust. The He family was defeated. He Xining was sitting in her room embroidering a square handkerchief. Su Zhiheng went to the Heavenly Star platform early in the morning. He did not know why, but since this morning He Xining's eyelids kept twitching. She had a feeling that something was going to happen. Even though she was sitting there, her heart was still pounding. She was so distracted that she accidentally felt a pain in her fingertip. Looking down, she saw that her fingertip had been pricked by a needle and there was a bloody hole on it. The blood stained the handkerchief. She stared at it in a daze. The ominous feeling in her heart grew stronger and stronger. Just as she was about to get up, Wu ran in from outside. With tears in her eyes, she shouted in horror. Young mistress, something happened. What happened? He Xining asked. Second madam, what happened to my mother? He Xining asked anxiously. Second madam is gone. The handkerchief in her hand fell to the ground. He Xining was stunned for a moment. Ignoring her bleeding finger, she grabbed Lu Er's arm and said in a sobbing voice, What do you mean my mother is gone? How could my mother be gone? Tell me clearly. This servant heard that Madame also went to the Heavenly Star platform today. Madame was fed poison by First Master. Madame even said in front of the Emperor that Second Miss was the real General Fei Hong. The soldiers have already brought people over. Young mistress, what should we do? He Xining felt her mind go blank. She knew every word that Lu Er said. Why was it so hard to understand when they were connected? First uncle? Why did first uncle feed mother poison? My sister? How could she be General Fei Hong? Isn't that my eldest brother? What exactly is going on? No one could answer He Xining's question. Just as Lu Er finished speaking, there was a commotion outside. Old Madame Su's angry roar resounded throughout the courtyard. He Xining looked at the soldiers who had appeared at the door and surrounded the courtyard. At this moment she was really out of her wits. Young mistress. Er grabbed her hand in fear. What should we do? Yes, what should they do? The incident at the Heavenly Star platform spread throughout the entire Shuo capital in less than half a day. It was impossible to hide such a big matter. The original fierce General Fei Hong on the battlefield was actually a woman. Later on, the person who appeared in front of everyone and took off his mask was actually her brother. The fact that the two of them swapped identities was already unbelievable. In the end, the He family turned around and killed He Yan. That inconceivable point became disdain for He Rufei's shamelessness and sympathy for He Yan. If the common people were more concerned about the legend of General Fei Hong, then the real chaos in the imperial court was because of Su Jingfu's imprisonment. Su Jingfu covered the sky with one hand in the imperial court. After so many years, many officials in the imperial court were his disciples. Once Su Jingfu fell, many people would fall with him. Therefore, the moment Su Jingfu was imprisoned, Su Jingfu's faction gathered together to think of a way to save Su Jingfu. Why don't I see fourth young Master Chu? An official looked around and didn't see Chu Zhao's shadow. Fourth young Master Chu is Prime Minister Su's most trusted person. I think everyone shouldn't act rashly, lest they all fall into Xiao Huijin's trap. Let's see what fourth young Master Chu has to say first. Since he is Prime Minister Su's son-in-law, fourth young Master Chu will naturally do his best to save Prime Minister Su. Everyone nodded. At this juncture, no one knew if Xiao Huijin had any other tricks up his sleeve. Although they were anxious, no one was willing to be the one to stand up for him. The more important it was at this time, the more selfish the people who formed an alliance because of benefits would be exposed. Chu Zhao had just returned home when Madame Chu saw him. She was startled and asked, "Why are you back?" Chu Zhao smiled. "What's wrong?" "Prime Minister Su has already." Madame Chu paused. "Why didn't you go and settle some matters? Why did you come back?" She also knew about Prime Minister Su's matter. No matter how much Madame Chu hated Chu Zhao, because of Chu Zhao, the entire Count Shijin's residence was already tied to Prime Minister Su. If something really happened to the Su family, how could the Count Shijin's residence gain anything? The world saw Chu Zhao as Su Jingfu's son-in-law, and naturally saw the entire Chu family as Su Jingfu's people. "There's nothing to settle," Chu Zhao said calmly. "Aren't you worried, Madam?" Chu Zhao interrupted her. "Nothing will happen to the Count Shijin's residence." "Madam, you don't have to worry." Madame Chu looked at Chu Zhao, increasingly confused. Disregarding everything else, Su Jingfu was his teacher. In the past few years, Su Jingfu had hinted to her many times, openly and secretly. Was the 4 treasures of the study that he sent to the Chu family for Chu Zhao every few days really just a simple gift? It was just to support Chu Zhao and warn her not to touch Chu Zhao. To Chu Zhao, Su Jingfu had indeed protected him. Unexpectedly, when something happened to Su Jingfu, Chu Zhao didn't have a trace of worry on his face, as if he didn't care about his teacher's life or death. Madame Chu felt an inexplicable sense of fear. Chu Zhao glanced at Madame Chu with a smile, then turned around and continued walking. Madame Chu looked at his back and couldn't help but grit her teeth. No matter what, she hoped that the Count Shurjin's residence wouldn't be implicated. When he entered his room, a servant came forward and said, "Fourth young master, there's news from Miss Ing Xiang. His Highness the Crown Prince hasn't made a move yet." Fourth young master means, "There's no need to worry," Chu Zhao said. "Xiao Huaijin still has evidence from the Battle of Mingshui. When that time comes, Prime Minister Su won't be able to make a comeback." Then the marriage between young master and Miss Su. Before Su Jingfu's death, his marriage with Su Pingting was enough to make countless people in Dawei envious. But now that something had happened to Su Jingfu, this marriage would be avoided like the plague. After all, the emperor's anger would be vented on everyone involved. "As usual," Chu Zhao said. The servant responded cautiously and left the room. Chu Zhao looked out the window. He wasn't surprised that Xiao Ju would make a move at this time. The opening of the market was imminent. If there wasn't enough leverage, Emperor Wenxuan would agree to Yudo's conditions sooner or later. Even if Su Jingfu tried to stop it, it was just to raise the price. But now it was different. The Battle of Hua Yuan, Su Jingfu's Battle of Mingshui, He Rufei's matter, and Su Zhiheng's matter were all suppressed. The emperor's anger would completely destroy this deal. However, the matter of He Rufei and his cousin swapping identities was beyond his expectations. Chu Zhao also didn't expect that the He family was hiding such a secret. No wonder He Rufei would secretly seek refuge with Su Jingfu. He probably knew that with his ability, he wouldn't be able to embark on the path of military exploits like his cousin. He remembered that on the square of the Heavenly Star platform, he wore red clothes and competed with He Rufei. Tian should have known about Xiao Ju's plan. Otherwise, he wouldn't have cooperated so well. A subtle hint of gloominess floated in his heart. Tian trusted Xiao Ju a lot. So much so that the two of them cooperated so well. Step by step, little by little, they uprooted the He family, the Su family, and the future Su family. There were red wedding cloths everywhere in the room. They were all prepared for his marriage with Su Pingting. Chu Zhao casually picked up the red silk on the table. The red silk was soft and as delicate as a woman's skin. He looked at it for a while, and then his hand loosened. The red silk floated down and fell into the burning stove. In an instant, it turned into ashes, leaving nothing behind. He Sui and He Yunxing returned to the Fu. When they saw He Yan lying on the bed, they were shocked. "What happened to Yan Yan?" He Sui asked. "Did something happen?" He worked during the day and didn't have the mood to chat with others, so he didn't know about these things. He Yunxing was also in the academy and didn't hear anything. At this moment, he saw that He Yan's eyes were closed and thought that something big had happened. It's fine. Lin Shuanghe was brewing medicine in the courtyard. Hearing this, he walked out and said, "Today on the Heavenly Star platform, He Mimi was sparring with someone and was accidentally injured. Huaijin sent her back and has been watching over her." He Sui asked, "You are—" "Oh," Lin Shuanghe wiped his hands. "I am Huaijin's friend, Lin Shuanghe. I met He Mimi at the Liangzhou Guards. My father and grandfather are both imperial physicians in the palace and know a bit about medicine." Lin Shuanghe. He Yunxing paused. "Is it the white-clothed divine hand that only treats women?" Yes. Lin Shuanghe said with a smile. Hearing that he was a physician, He Sui's heart relaxed a bit. He asked Lin Shuanghe, "Is there really nothing wrong with my daughter?" "It's really nothing," Lin Shuanghe said with a smile. "It's just that she doesn't have enough strength. These days it's been too cold. I wrote a few prescriptions to nurse her body back to health. These days I told her not to do any heavy work and just to rest well." He Sui looked at He Yan, who was lying on the bed. Seeing that her breathing was even and she didn't seem to have any problems, he nodded. "Thank you for your concern, Dr. Lin." As they were talking, Xiao Ju came in from outside. He Yunxing was stunned. "Why is Military Governor Xiao still here?" "Huaijin hasn't left yet." Lin Shuanghe shrugged. "He said that he would leave after He Mimi wakes up. Won't that be too much of a delay for you?" He Sui asked. Huaijin, you're busy. Yunxing and I can take care of her. It's okay, Xiaoju said. I'll leave after she wakes up. Since he said so, He Sui and He Yunxing couldn't persuade him anymore. Lin Shuanghe said, my medicine is almost done. It's drying now. Huaijin, remember to feed it to He Mimi later. Isn't there Qing Mei? He Sui said politely. How can I trouble Dr. Lin to brew the medicine yourself? Not everyone can brew medicine. Lin Shuanghe smiled. My prescription is special. I'm afraid that others won't be able to brew the medicine to its fullest potential. It's better for me to do it myself. Besides, He Mimi and I are friends. There's no need to trouble me. When I was in the Liangzhou Guards, He Mimi took care of me a lot. In that case, thank you very much, Dr. Lin. He Sui was very grateful. Afraid of disturbing He Yan's rest, He Yunxing and He Sui left the room first. As soon as they left the room, Qing Mei ran over and whispered urgently, there's a young master outside. He said he's here to look for Military Governor Xiao. Xiaoju asked, who is it? It's me. Before she finished speaking, someone's voice sounded. They turned around and saw Yan He walking in aggressively. Yan Nongguang, what are you doing here? Lin Shuanghe asked curiously. I'm here to look for him. Yan He looked at Xiaoju. I have something to ask you. Go ahead. Yan He looked around. He Sui quickly said, Yunxing and I will go to the kitchen to help make dinner. You guys can talk among yourselves. After that, he left with He Yunxing. Qing Mei also quickly followed. Yan He looked at Lin Shuanghe. What? You're avoiding me too? You want to ask about He Rufei? Xiaoju said calmly. That's right. Yan He raised his eyebrows. I'm here to ask you. Did you already know that He Rufei was a girl? That's why you took care of her when she was in the Xianchang Hall? You secretly taught her swordsmanship? Wait. Lin Shuanghe was puzzled. We all know that He Rufei is a girl today at the Heavenly Star platform. What do you mean by teaching her swordsmanship? Did I miss something that I don't know about? Xiaoju ignored Lin Shuanghe and said, no. Do you think I'll believe you? Yan He said angrily. Since you already knew that she was a girl, why didn't you tell me? I'm a man. Now that I think about it, how could I bully a girl? If I knew that she was a girl, I wouldn't have caused trouble for her all the time. Ever since Yan He found out that He Rufei was a woman, the more he thought about it after he returned to the Fu, the more upset he felt. He boasted that he was a magnanimous man. In the past, he did not find He Rufei pleasing to the eye only because he felt that this brat did not have much ability to begin with and even received Xiaoju's guidance. But now that he knew the truth, he felt that he was an unreasonable bully who bullied the weak. This Xiaoju was too despicable. It was fine if he wanted to be the hero who saved the damsel in distress, but why did he have to make others seem so despicable and evil? I didn't tell you. Xiaoju frowned. I only found out not too long ago. When was not too long ago? Jinling Huayuxian. Yan He was stunned. Huayuxian? Lin Shuanghe also realized. Huaijin, you mean that Huayuxian told you when we passed by Jinling on our way back? She only said that the person wearing the mask was a girl. I was suspicious, so I started to investigate. Xiaoju hid part of the truth and said half-truthfully, I didn't expect the ending to be like this. She's called He Yan? Yan He asked. We were classmates for a few years. She always used the name He Rufei. Later on, when Su Jihan got married, I didn't remember the name of his wife. If her mother didn't tell us today, no one would know. Lin Shuanghe also asked, right, I almost forgot. Huaijin, isn't that the same name as Sister He? Oh my god. Lin Shuanghe gasped. Look, Sister He also knows swordsmanship. She's also disguised as a man. She can also go to the battlefield. Could she be the reincarnation of He Yan? What reincarnation? Yan He impatiently interrupted his fantasy. The age doesn't even match. Even if she's not reincarnated, she's still a spirit? Or did she ask for revenge in her dreams? Isn't that what's written in legends? Otherwise, how do you explain this coincidence? Also, why did you investigate the He family for no reason, Huaijin? Isn't it to avenge her? I'm afraid it's not just for revenge, Yan He said. He looked at Xiao Ju with a sharp gaze. He Rufei is just a bait. I'm afraid the real person you want to deal with is Prime Minister Su. But I'm curious. Since you want to deal with Prime Minister Su, why don't you show all the evidence in your hands? Aren't you afraid that Prime Minister Su's people will mess up your plan? You can wait and see, Xiao Ju answered expressionlessly. Yan He snorted. I'm not interested in your personal grudges, and I don't want to see how you overthrow Prime Minister Su's faction. But you also know that Prime Minister Su is the Crown Prince's person. Now that you've touched Prime Minister Su, the Crown Prince probably hates you. When the Crown Prince ascends the throne in the future, I'm afraid he won't tolerate you. Do you plan to? Yan Nongguang. Without waiting for him to finish, Lin Shuanghe interrupted him. Be careful with your words. Yan He stopped talking and looked at Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju's expression didn't change at all because of his words. After a moment of silence, he said, Lin Shuanghe, do you think you can hide everything by burying your head in the ground? Let me tell you, what's going to come will come sooner or later. Xiao Huaijin, since you've made this move, from today onwards, there won't be any peaceful days in the capital. Take care of yourselves first, he said. Chapter 238. After Yan He left, the sky gradually darkened. Lin Shuanghe was also about to leave. Before he left, he reminded Xiao Ju, remember to feed Sister He the medicine. After she drinks it, she should wake up soon. I'll come again tomorrow. Huaijin, don't worry too much. After sending Lin Shuanghe away, He Sui and He Yunxing were also worried about He Yan. However, Xiao Ju was guarding He Yan's bed, so they could not enter. He Sui pulled He Yunxing away. The medicine in the bowl gradually cooled down. Xiao Ju helped He Yan up and carefully fed her a spoonful of medicine. The medicine flowed down the corner of He Yan's mouth. He quickly put down the bowl and wiped the medicine stains on He Yan's lips with a handkerchief. He frowned slightly. He Yan's face was still pale. She had always been magnanimous and always had a smile on her face. Even if she was seriously injured, she would still joke and tell the people around her not to worry. This was the first time he saw her in pain even in her dreams. He reached out and gently stroked He Yan's hair. He turned his head and looked at the bowl of medicine on the table that was about to turn cold. He paused for a moment and finally made up his mind. He picked up the bowl of medicine again and lowered his head to drink it. The girl on the bed had her eyes tightly closed. Her eyelashes gently drooped down, showing a fragility that was not there before. The young man's gaze was fixed on the girl on the bed. His body was a little stiff. After struggling for a moment, he finally slowly bent down and lowered his head to cover her lips. The medicine was not hot anymore. It was just right. After he finished the bowl of medicine, his ears were completely red. He gently sighed in relief. He sat up straight and covered He Yan with the quilt. Xiao Ju had never considered whether he was a gentleman or not. In the past, he did things based on his heart. Only when he was with the girl in front of him did he have many worries. He was always afraid that she would feel conflicted. Xiao Ju took the empty bowl out of the house. The moment she stepped out of the house, she saw a young man squatting under the eaves of the house across the yard. He was using a tree branch to draw on the snow. He Yunxing's eyes lit up when he saw Xiao Ju coming out. Xiao Ju put the empty bowl in the kitchen. When she came back, He Yunxing was already in front of He Yan's room. He looked at Xiao Ju as if he wanted to say something. Xiao Ju closed the door of He Yan's room to prevent the wind from blowing in. Then, she looked at He Yunxing and asked, Do you have something to say to me? He Yunxing swallowed his saliva. He used to idolize Xiao Ju. Most likely, all the young men in Shuo City were like him. When did he change? It was probably when He Yan took the blame for killing Fan Cheng on the Chunlai River and led the soldiers away by himself. He Yunxing suddenly realized that it was useless to just idolize others. Only when he was strong could he protect He Yan, He Sui, and the people he wanted to protect. Instead of focusing on people far away, he would rather spend more effort to improve himself. Later, He Yan came back and became Marquis Wuan. He even brought back a fiancé. This fiancé just had to be Xiao Ju. He Yunxing actually did not have any enmity towards Xiao Ju. The so-called resistance he showed came from He Yan's nervousness. He Yan almost lost his life for Fan Qing. Who knew if Xiao Ju was another Fan Qing? No one could say for sure. But today, he saw that when He Yan fainted, Xiao Ju stayed by He Yan's bed. She wiped her hands and dried her medicine. She never left. He thought that Xiao Ju must like his sister. Moreover, this love was deeper than he and He Sui imagined. Military Governor Xiao, the young man said nervously but firmly, will you always be good to He Yan? Xiao Ju looked at him in surprise. She was silent for a moment before she replied, yes. My sister, she is very different from other girls. He Yunsheng thought for a moment before he slowly said, no one can stop her from doing what she wants to do. No one can force her to do what she doesn't want to do. But she is a good person. Don't hurt her. He Yunsheng said, if you hurt her, the young man said in a low voice, even if I have to pay the price, I will get an explanation for her. Xiao Ju looked at him. After a while, she smiled and said, okay. After a pause, she said, but you probably won't have the chance. He Yunsheng also smiled and said, this is a conversation between two men. When He Yan wakes up, don't tell her. Xiao Ju looked down at the snow piled up on the ground. The snow in the courtyard hadn't been swept clean in time and was only covered with a thin layer. He asked He Yunsheng, are you very concerned about He Yan? The young man instinctively wanted to refute, but when the words reached his mouth, he sighed and said, she is my sister. She was his sister. Since they were young, she always bullied him, scolded him, took away his favorite pastries, and always complained to He Sui. But she would always stand in front of him and protect him. In this world, other than He Sui, they were the closest people to each other. How could he not care? That's good. The young man said, you will always care about her in the future. Of course I will always care about her. He Yunsheng said. He couldn't help but look at the young man standing next to him. He didn't know why, but his previous worries suddenly dissipated. Xiao Ju was different from Fan Qing. He Yan had a very long dream. In the dream, she was still young, wearing a mask. At that time, she hadn't gone to the Xianchang school to study. She was still a pitiful person who could only sneak out through the dog hole and stay in the fu. One morning, she was helping the monks carry water in from Donghuang Mountain. When she went back through the dog hole, she accidentally bumped into a servant who had woken up early to pour night incense. She was so scared that she turned around and ran. She accidentally bumped into someone. This person's skirt was very fragrant, like a flower in spring. The fragrance made people yearn for it. Her voice was also soft and carried a hint of a smile. A pair of hands pulled her up from the ground. That madame's eyebrows were somewhat similar to hers. She looked at her with a very gentle gaze. She pulled her slightly to the side, hiding her figure. After the servants left, she gently patted He Yan's hand and softly said, it's okay. Be careful. He Yan was wearing a mask, so the other party couldn't see her face. However, she thought that at that time, her face under the mask must have been dazed and filled with a desire to get close to him. The madam turned around and left. He Yan followed behind. She wanted to call her mother, but she didn't know why she couldn't catch up to her even though she was so close. She watched as the madam walked further and further away until she disappeared from her sight. She fell to the ground in a sorry state. Her heart was filled with grief and grievance. She couldn't help but cry loudly. He Yan. Someone seemed to be calling her name by her ear. He Yan opened her eyes and met Xiao Ju's concerned gaze. She felt that her face was cold. She subconsciously reached out and touched it. It was actually covered in tears. In an instant she understood everything. The events on the Heavenly Star platform replayed in her mind. She closed her eyes and couldn't help but feel the overwhelming pain. My mother, she just said one word as tears rolled down her face. He Yan originally thought that although she and Madame He were mother and daughter in name, there was no mother-daughter relationship. During those years when she longed for her mother's care, Madame He was forever missing. She didn't resent her, but she more or less complained. Even after her rebirth, she didn't know how to face Madame He again. Now, she didn't have the chance. His Majesty allowed me to bury Madame He, Xiao Ju said softly. He Yen. He couldn't think of any words to comfort the girl in front of him. You don't have to endure it. If you want to cry, just cry. Chui Luo had come here once and told him the truth. Madam, he had been preparing for this day for a long time. He Rufei did not feed her the poison. She hid the poison herself. Madam, he was already prepared to die. With her body, she didn't have long to live. She asked Chui Luo for a token to go to the Heavenly Star platform. When the He family wasn't paying attention, she climbed out of the dog hole that He Yen dug and rushed to the Heavenly Star platform. She wanted to use her own life to give He Yen the last piece of evidence. The so-called deal with Xiao Ju was the last life-saving talisman she hid for He Xining. It was also the escape route she arranged for He Yen. Xiao Ju had never cared about the tricks of a woman's backyard. However, Madame He's method wasn't very clever. She wanted to create the illusion that she was biased towards He Yen, but she couldn't help but care about He Yen. In the end, she didn't hesitate to sacrifice her own life to clear He Yan's name. If a mother didn't love her daughter, she wouldn't do this. But, if this was her last wish, he was willing to cooperate with her and let her get a little bit of satisfaction from her plan. Madame He didn't have much freedom in her life. She rarely had the chance to decide her own fate. She couldn't decide her own birth, but she could decide her own death. She used her death to pave a future for her two daughters, even if she couldn't see it. He Yen choked and said, Xiao Ju, I don't have a mother. I won't have a mother in the future. Although the word, mother, didn't exist many times in her life, as long as it existed, there might be a glimmer of hope. But Madame He had left. She wouldn't have a chance in the future. The so-called fantasy between mother and daughter could only be a fantasy forever. There was no chance for it to come true. God was so cruel that He didn't even give her this chance. She regretted that she didn't say more to Madame He when they were at Yuhua Temple. Xiao Ju lowered his eyes and stared at her, feeling upset. Of course, he knew how sad He Yen was at this moment. He also felt the same way. If it was physical pain, he could bear it for He Yen. But no one could bear the pain of losing a loved one for her. What did she say to you in the end? He Yen asked. At that time, only Xiao Ju was by Madame He's side. No one heard their conversation. She didn't know what Madame He said before she died. Was there a sentence for her? She said. Xiao Ju paused and said slowly, she was Yen Yen of Hiyu, so she couldn't take you with her. She loved you and hoped that you would live well. He Yan's sobs suddenly sounded in the room. After a long time, the room quieted down. He Yen wiped the tears on his face and said in a calm voice, Xiao Ju, the emperor confiscated the He and Su families. He Xining is my sister. She has nothing to do with this matter. I will explain this matter to the emperor. Don't worry. Xiao Ju was silent for a moment. Then, he reached out and hugged her in his arms. He whispered, He Yen, I will always be with you. In the palace. In Concubine Land's hall, the fourth prince was staring at the burning candles in a daze. Did you come here just to be in a daze? Concubine Land's words pulled Guang Shuo back from his thoughts. Guang Shuo came back to his senses and said, Mother, I was just thinking about what happened on the Heavenly Star platform today. What happened today shocked the whole of Dawei. That General Fei Hong was actually a woman. Who would have thought? Guang Shuo still couldn't believe it when he said this. It turns out that women can also fight and become great generals. Don't look down on women. Concubine Lan smiled and picked up the teacup in front of her. Her voice was light. You men fight on the battlefield and women fight in the backyard. No one is sadder than the other. Of all the women in the world, what men could do, women could do as well. It's just that there are too few people who are willing to take the lead. Guang Shuo, you have to remember that if you look down on women, you will suffer greatly in the future. Guang Shuo respectfully said, This son will remember. He paused and then sighed. But that General Fei Hong's second young miss was killed by her family in the end. The He family is too vicious and merciless. They even killed their own daughter. Concubine Lan smiled non-committally. It's not that the time hasn't come. The time hasn't come yet. The He family has sown the seeds, and now it's time for them to reap the fruits of their own evil deeds. That's true. Guang Shuo heard this and nodded. He said, "Right now, Imperial Father is investigating the He and Su families. The evidence is conclusive. The He family can't turn things around. This can also be considered as giving some comfort to the real General He in the underworld." Concubine Lon looked at him and smiled but didn't say anything. "Mother, why are you looking at this son? What do you think about Prime Minister Su's matter?" Concubine Lon asked. Guang Shuo was startled. Right now, Xiao Huaijin and Prime Minister Su have completely fallen out with each other. Since Xiao Huaijin sent Prime Minister Su back to prison, he won't let go of this opportunity. I think he should have other evidence in his hands. This son also thinks so. Guang Shuo replied. It's just that. Just what? I'm afraid that Imperial Father won't be ruthless to Prime Minister Su. Your Imperial Father is a nostalgic person. Concubine Lon looked into the distance. When His Majesty first ascended the throne, it was Prime Minister Su who helped him secure the throne. Naturally, His Majesty has a favor for Prime Minister Su that no one else has. However, your Imperial Father is already old. Guang Shuo looked at the woman in front of him. An old emperor will make plans for the future. No matter how outrageous your Imperial Father is, he won't want Awei's country to be destroyed in his hands. Whether it's for the Crown Prince or the future Crown Prince, His Majesty will definitely punish Prime Minister Su. Guang Shuo, since you want to fight, you should fight for Xiao Huaijin. The way to deal with people is like the way to use soldiers. The best way is to attack the heart. Xiao Huaijin is trying to redress his father's grievances. If you add flowers to the brocade at this time, it will be like sending charcoal in the snow. Guang Shuo was silent for a while, then said, "Mother, this son understands. You are as benevolent as your Imperial Father." Concubine Lon looked at him gently. "I know you don't like politics and people's hearts, but Guang Shuo, if you want to be an emperor, you must learn how to govern your subjects. This isn't a bad thing. You were born in the Imperial Palace, and you want to choose your own destiny, so you must do this. There's no such thing as having the best of both worlds. Look at your Imperial Father. He lived a carefree life, but now, isn't he also tied down?" Guang Shuo didn't say anything. The candle's oil dripped onto the table like red tears. The hall was quiet. Only the woman's sleeves were fragrant, creating a layer of empty and cold air. Xiao Ju entered the Imperial Palace in the middle of the night. Emperor Wenshuan hadn't yet rested when the chamberlain called him into the imperial study. The table was filled with memorials and files, scattered haphazardly. He wasn't in the mood to look at them. He wasn't a diligent emperor. Perhaps during his first 2 years on the throne he had tried to do this, but later on he gave up. In this world, there were emperors who worked hard to govern, and there were also emperors who were mediocre and didn't do anything. Emperor Wenshuan felt that there was nothing wrong with being a mediocre emperor his whole life. All he wanted to do was to live an ordinary life. When the time came, he would pass the throne to his son. That would be enough. He had indeed lived like this for most of his life. Sometimes, Emperor Wenshuan felt that it was quite beautiful. He wasn't like his father, who was always busy with work. He wasn't like the retired emperor and the others, who personally led the imperial army on expeditions. He had it easier than them, and he had lived longer than them. Wasn't the Dawei also doing well? As long as they were good at using people, the military would defend the country, and the civil officials would govern the imperial court. Until today, the truth that he thought was true was completely overturned. Emperor Wenshuan sat here and suddenly realized that he really hadn't been a proper emperor all these years. He wasn't a talented emperor. If he hadn't been born into the imperial family, he would have preferred to be an idle prince, the son of an ordinary official, or even the son of a wealthy merchant. He didn't have any great ambitions and he didn't have any talent. He only wanted to write poems, paint, and enjoy the pleasures of the world. He wouldn't be sitting in this position now, where every action of his was related to the lives of tens of millions of people. If he didn't do well, people would scold him behind his back. If he did well, people would think that he deserved it. An emperor who longed for freedom was a taboo in the imperial family. He had hidden his thoughts deep in his heart, but it turned out that everyone could see through him. Xiao Ju entered. Emperor Wenxuan looked at the young man in front of him. He still remembered the first time Xiao Zhongwu brought Xiao Ju to him. Xiao Ju was just a young man. He was so beautiful that he was even more handsome than the imperial family's children. He had a proud expression, but also a little careless. He was completely different from his gentle and polite elder brother. At that time, when Xuandi was still thinking that Xiao Zhongwu, a warrior, actually had 2 outstanding sons, which was really enviable. He didn't expect Xiao Ju to have grown so much in the blink of an eye. The young man's youthful immaturity had completely disappeared. He looked at Emperor Wenxuan calmly, respectfully, and a little coldly. He suddenly thought of Xiao Zhongwu. Emperor Wenxuan said, "Actually, you and your father do look a little alike." He had always thought that Xiao Ju looked like Madame Xiao. His eyes were bright and beautiful, but in fact, his sharpness and calmness came from his father. "Your Majesty, do you still remember my father?" Xiao Ju said calmly. Emperor Wenxuan was stunned. He thought that after a long time, his memory would be a little blurry. But when he remembered, Xiao Zhongwu's appearance was so clear. The tall man who always wore golden armor and carried a sword was different from the scholarly officials in the court. He was like the northwest wind, biting cold, wanton, and magnanimous. Everyone who yearned for freedom was envious of him. Emperor Wenxuan was also envious. But in the end, Xiao Zhongwu died. Xiao family almost collapsed. If the young man in front of him hadn't led 3,000 soldiers to Gua City, perhaps the Xiao family in Dawei would have been wiped out. He looked at Xiao Ju and asked, "Did you hate me back then?" "I wouldn't dare." Emperor Wenxuan chuckled. "If you wouldn't dare, then you would have crossed the line." In the whole world, only this person in front of him had the guts to say that to his face. But he wasn't angry. Perhaps it was because no one had dared to speak the truth in front of him for many years. "Your Majesty," Xiao Ju said, "I beg you to let go of the wife of Hanlin Academy scholar Su Zhiheng. He's Xining." He's Xining? Back then, the real General Fei Hong and second Miss He were sisters of the same mother. Xiao Ju said, after the He family's second young miss was drowned in the pond, the He family married the He family's second young miss's younger sister, He Xining, to Su Zhiheng's second wife. He looked at Emperor Wenxuan and said, "Madam, he is already dead. Young Mistress Su is General Fei Hong's only remaining relative in the world. Moreover, I've already asked around. Young Mistress Su knows nothing about General Fei Hong and He Rufei's exchange of identities. Your Majesty is benevolent. For the sake of General Fei Hong, please forgive He Xining and spare her life." "General Fei Hong," Emperor Wenxuan murmured. Everything that happened in the Heavenly Star platform today was because of General Fei Hong. However, he did not expect that the Fei Hong he personally conferred was actually a woman. At that time, when He Rufei took off his mask and revealed his handsome face, when Xuandi was still doubting whether the rumor that He Rufei had a birthmark on his face and his ugly appearance was false. Now, it seemed that the He family had already started a scam to deceive the world. If He's second miss was still alive, Emperor Wenxuan might punish her for her crimes. After all, she had participated in deceiving the emperor. However, He's second miss was dead, and she died so tragically. Death was like an extinguished lamp. No one remembered anything bad about her before she died. People would always be tolerant of a dead person, thinking that there was nothing bad about her. Forget it. Let her live. Emperor Wenxuan sighed. After all, General Fei Hong truly fought for Dawei and quelled the Western Chang Rebellion. On behalf of General Fei Hong, I thank Your Majesty for your grace. Emperor Wenxuan looked at Xiao Ju and smiled. I heard that you were once classmates with General Fei Hong. It seems like you are a sentimental person. If General Fei Hong knew about this in the underworld, he would be gratified. Xiao Ju did not speak. Emperor Wenxuan waved his hand. You may leave. The young man bowed and turned to leave. However, Emperor Wenxuan stopped him. The emperor's voice was filled with fatigue. I have treated Prime Minister Su well for so many years. Why would Prime Minister Su still want to rebel? The servant lowered his head and did not dare to speak. After a while, the young man spoke. He will become arrogant if he is spoiled too much. Perhaps your majesty has treated him too well. Chapter 239. The dungeon was very damp, and there were bloodstains and stains on the floor. He Xining hugged her knees and sat in the corner, watching the black insects crawling under the hay. She couldn't help but shiver. It was too cold here, and no one paid any attention to her. She had been pampered since she was a child, so when had she ever suffered such grievances? But the jailers here didn't pay any attention to her. He Rufei and Su Zhiheng weren't locked in the same place as her, so she didn't know where they were. In the beginning, she didn't know what had happened. It wasn't until the jailers here began to chat and talk about what happened on the Heavenly Star platform that He Xining recalled what Lu Er had said to her before she was caught, and she slowly came to her senses. Her dead elder sister was the real General Fei Hong. For all these years, He Rufei and He Yen had been using each other's identities. After He Yen entered the capital, He Rufei falsely claimed meritorious service, and in order to get rid of future troubles, he actually drowned He Yen in the Su family's pond. No wonder every time she passed by the pond in the courtyard, she always felt cold all over. No wonder Su Zhiheng searched He Yan's former residence for He Yan's belongings. Su Zhiheng, did he also know about this matter? Or was he also one of the executioners in this matter? He Xining felt cold all over. The one who revealed the truth was General Feng Yun, Xiao Huaijin. Previously at Yuhua Temple, when her mother saw Xiao Huaijin, she took the initiative to talk to him. Thinking of He Heir's wife, He Xining felt a burst of heartache. Did He Heir's wife also know about this matter from beginning to end? When eldest uncle made this request, didn't father say anything to stop it? He Rufei ordered He Yen to be drowned. Did father know about it but didn't say anything, or was he completely unaware? He Xining hoped it was the latter, but in her heart, she felt it was very likely to be the former. She leaned against the wall weakly. Looking back on half of her life, she felt like it was a joke. The father that she thought loved her dearly turned out to be a person who could disregard the kinship of his own flesh and blood for the sake of benefits. She thought that she had married the ideal husband, but it turned out that her big brother, who she thought was awe-inspiring and could bring protection to the family, was actually an impostor who only knew how to seize other people's merits and use the power of others to intimidate others. In the end, her family was broken up. Her mother was gone, and her elder sister was long gone. She was all alone here, and her heart was filled with desolation. The crime of deceiving the monarch was punishable by death. He Xining sobbed softly. Forget it, death was death. There was no one in this world that she was reluctant to part with. Being able to reunite with his family after death was not necessarily a bad thing. Just as he was thinking, he suddenly heard footsteps. He Xining looked up and saw a prison guard following behind an unfamiliar man. The two of them walked to He Xining's cell door. The jailer opened the door and said to He Xining, "Miss He, please." He Xining was startled. "Where are we going?" "His Majesty is benevolent. He is grateful to General Fei Hong for his meritorious service in pacifying Western Chang and died with injustice. Miss He is General Fei Hong's biological sister, so His Majesty is lenient. However, in the future, he will be demoted to a commoner and will spare Miss He's life. From today onwards, Miss He does not need to stay here." He Xining took a while to understand what the jailer meant. She slowly stood up and walked out of the door. She followed the two of them out of the prison. The night outside was dark. Her clothes were thin and she stood alone. She suddenly gained freedom, but she did not know where to go next. The He family and Su family were no longer here. The world was big, but there was no place for her to stay. He Xining lowered her head and smiled bitterly. She muttered to herself, "Where else can I go?" "Miss He." Someone spoke from behind her. He Xining turned around to look. It was the man who came with the jailer. He seemed to be a guard from some family. He Xining said, "Miss He, if you don't have anywhere else to go, you can temporarily go to a place to hide." But He Xining asked, "Your sister studied at the Xianchang school when she was young. The head of the Xianchang school, Wei Xianzhang, had a teacher-student relationship with your sister. After learning the truth, I sympathize with your sister's situation. If Miss He has nowhere else to go, you can go to Mr. Wei's house first. Mr. Wei often stays at the school and only has his wife at home. He Xining was stunned. After a while, she laughed self-deprecatingly and said, "So even after my sister's death, she is still protecting me." "Young master, please lead the way," she said. Now that the He and Su families were in trouble, she did not need to think to know that her former relatives and friends were afraid of getting into trouble and avoided them like snakes and scorpions. If she went now, no one would dare to take her in. She had not thought of what to do next, but first, she had to find a place to sit down and thoroughly understand all the things that she did not understand. She really did not have anywhere else to go. Su Zhiheng and He Rufei, who were in prison, did not know that He Xining had been taken out. They were detained separately to prevent the two of them from colluding. He Rufei could not see Su Zhiheng, and Su Zhiheng could not see He Rufei. However, this was a good thing for the two of them. If the two of them were really locked up together, they would probably fight on the spot. Su Zhiheng hated He Rufei for being a burden to him. He Rufei hated Su Zhiheng for being impatient to throw all the blame on him when something happened on the Heavenly Star platform. In the end, because of the benefits of the alliance, it was as fragile as paper. As long as the wind blew, the rain fell, and there was no need to tear, he would be unrecognizable. He Rufei sat in the corner of the prison. Even at this time, he did not give up. He was still thinking of a possible escape plan. Prime Minister Su's people would definitely not sit by and do nothing. If they wanted to save Su Jingfu, they might be able to help him as well. In the worst-case scenario, Su Jingfu would abandon the rook to save the king. However, he still had evidence of Su Jingfu's treason. How could Su Jingfu leave him behind to protect himself? How could it be possible? The incident on the Heavenly Star platform was really beyond his expectations. He did not expect that woman called He Yen to be so powerful. He also did not expect that Xiao Ju already had so much evidence in her hands. Step by step, she forced him to a point of no return. Thinking of that woman, He Rufei's eyes flashed with a trace of malice. What was the relationship between that woman and his dead cousin? He Rufei did not know. He did not see He Yan's heroic appearance on the battlefield. Because when he returned to Shuajing, He Yan had quickly changed back to her female appearance. Therefore, he only heard about the legends of General Fei Hong and did not see it with his own eyes. From his point of view, the dead He Yan, his cousin, was merely a woman who appeared to be a bit stronger than ordinary women. When others said that General Fei Hong's skills were extraordinary, he did not believe it. When others said that General Fei Hong could fight against 10 people on the battlefield, he also did not believe it. The reason why he did not believe it was very simple. It was because he could not do it. If he could not do it, He Yan was a woman. It was even more impossible for her to do it. Until the sword duel on the Heavenly Star platform. He Rufei closed his eyes. A wave of frustration rose in his heart. If the real He Yan was still alive, would she be like this when she used a sword? But how could she still be alive? She definitely could not be alive. In the quiet prison, the sound of footsteps could be heard. He Rufei was locked in the innermost cell. He listened carefully. The footsteps were getting closer and closer until they stopped in front of him. The prison guard actually opened the cell door. He Rufei raised his head and looked at the person who came in. The young man in black coldly glanced at him. It was as if he was stingy to waste a second on him. He was standing, while He Rufei was sitting. It was as if he was showing that he was inferior. I wonder what military governor Xiao is doing here? He Rufei sneered. Don't tell me he is here to silence me? Without waiting for Xiao Ju to reply, he opened his mouth again. Actually, I don't understand. How did military governor Xiao find out about this matter? If it was Su Zhiheng who leaked the information to Mother Qin, then Xiao Ju immediately guessed the reason. Furthermore, she had already started to collect evidence. He Rufei could not understand even if he thought about it now. After all, putting everything else aside, if he told others that General Fei Hong is a woman, they would only think that he was spouting nonsense. Why did Xiao Ju know about it? The young man looked at him indifferently and said coldly, "How do you think I found out?" "I don't know." He Rufei stared at the person in front of him and suddenly smiled. He leaned against the wall and said slowly, I heard that you and my dead sister went to school together. Let me think, maybe you had an affair with her. Are you treating me like this because you want to stand up for my sister? He snorted and his face became a little distorted. Is there really someone in this world who likes my rebellious sister? What's so good about her? She doesn't even seem like a woman. Before he finished speaking, he suddenly felt a pain in his chest and flew out. His back hit the stone wall and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Xiao Ju did not hold back. He Rufei was kicked for a long time. The prison guard had already received the news and retreated outside. He turned a blind eye to the situation inside. If Su Jingfu fell, no one in the imperial court would be able to stop Xiao Ju. At this juncture, no one dared to offend the right military governor. He Rufei wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked at Xiao Ju. He slowly smiled. General Feng Yun, the jade-faced military governor of Dawei. He was so mighty and heroic. Just by standing here, he was enough to make people unable to look away. No one could steal his limelight. If He Yen had not changed everyone's fate that year, he might not have interacted with Xiao Ju in his life. But he did. Why are all of you so angry? He Rufei sneered. Everyone is fighting for justice for my sister, but what about me? His voice suddenly rose. What about me? What about my life? Is it not important? She should pay for her stupid decision for her entire life. Why should I? I also have things that I want to do. Do you think I want to be a general? His eyes were red. He was like a wild beast that wanted to tear everything apart. Who wants to be a general? Who wants to be a general? He Rufei had not lived in the He residence for as long as he could remember. He lived in a faraway village. He knew that his health was not good and he also knew that he had swapped identities with his cousin. He could not go to places that were too far away and he could not leave his side. He Yuanxing and his wife would sometimes secretly come to see him, but they would always leave in a hurry. The doctor said that he would not live for more than a few years, but he did not know if it was because he was tough, but he endured year after year. When he was 16 years old, his body had completely recovered. He thought that he could leave the village and return to the He family as the eldest young master. But at that time, he received news that He Yen had gone to the battlefield and he could not return for the time being. He Rufei was forced to continue staying in the village. He had also secretly prayed that He Yen would not die on the battlefield. It was not because of the deep sibling relationship, nor was it because he was kind-hearted. It was because He Yen was using his identity. If He Yen died on the battlefield, he, the eldest young master, would never be able to return to the He family. Fortunately, He Yen came back. In those many years, He Rufei did not have many feelings for He Yen. He did not like him, but he also did not hate him. Until the day he returned to the He family, He Yen had just returned home and did not see him. Outside, the soldiers and horses were crowding around the young deputy general. She wore a mask and stood in the sunlight, looking magnanimous and frank. Her sword was beautiful and sharp, and her warhorse was strong and gentle. Although her face could not be seen, her eyes were as bright as the stars. He Rufei's heart suddenly had a trace of resentment. For so many years, he had been living a shameful life in the village. He thought that He Yen was the same as him, but when he really saw her, he realized that she was completely different. She used her identity to live such a happy life. What right did she have? She decided the fate of others without permission and then returned the fate that had already been arranged to his own hands. But He Rufei's heart was very complicated. On one hand, he hated accepting the fate that He Yen had already chosen, such as being a military general. But on the other hand, when he stood in the throne room and received the emperor's reward, he would feel satisfied when the courtiers looked at him with envy and jealousy. But this kind of satisfaction humiliated him because He Rufei was very clear that the praise and good name belonged to He Yen, and not to him. Every time he heard those people praise General Fei Hong's bravery and invincibility on the battlefield behind his back, his heart would be especially tormented. This little bit of torment would eventually give birth to anxiety. This anxiety made him feel uneasy. Even when He Yen got married, he did not solve this problem. For example, when he stole a beautiful gemstone, he was proud of himself for being able to own this gemstone. He also accepted the envious and longing gazes of others, but he was also worried that one day, someone would discover that the owner of this gemstone was not him. This evil thought grew bigger and bigger until one day, he thought, if only He Yen was dead. When this thought appeared, He Rufei found that he actually calmed down. He found a way to solve this problem. Breaking the wings would only make General Fei Hong unable to fly into the sky, but Fei Hong was still Fei Hong. It would be better to pull the bird down from the sky, drown it in the water, and bury it in the ground. In the future, no one would find this bird's trace. He finally calmed down. But why, not long after the peaceful days passed, it was impatiently interrupted by someone who could not wait. Liar! The young man's voice was calm, and his eyes were as cold as water. You really want to be General Fei Hong, but you don't dare to admit it. As if the secret in the depths of his heart was seen, He Rufei suddenly raised his head. I don't. You do. He Rufei gritted his teeth. The man's eyes were clear and indifferent, but it made him unable to hide his embarrassment. He clenched his fists and tried to stand up. Tell me, is she He Yen or not? If I say yes, the young man lowered his eyes, his silver crown drew a cold light under the dim light of the prison. What will you do? I don't believe it. He Rufei could not help but tremble. He did not know whether it was from hatred or fear. He said, I don't believe a word you say. But in fact he somewhat believed it. Those inexplicable coincidences, the familiarity with the He family's terrain, the secret in the study room, the secret of the exquisite box, and that big brother on the heavenly star platform. The two of them were born at the same time on a certain night many years ago, so fate was forced, coincidental, and entangled together. Like two intertwined vines, they absorbed nutrients from each other. If he wanted to live, he had to pull out the vine beside him. The so-called twins did not bring about dependence and trust, but betrayal and enemies. He Yen lived in the light, so he had to live in the dark. If he wanted to walk in front of people openly, he had to pull out the person who was originally in the light by the roots. He did well. He Rufei smiled bitterly. At this moment, there was an inexplicable sense of relief. He did not know whether he was jealous or resentful of He Yen, but at this moment he suddenly realized that what he hated was the feeling of being a substitute. When others looked at you, they were looking at another person. When others thought of you, they were thinking of another person. How laughable, how sad. The shadow killed the master, but the shadow was still the shadow. In his life with He Yen, whether he was the substitute of He Yen or He Yen was his substitute, no one could say for sure. Was he Rufei or He Yen? No one could answer him. What if he and He Yen did not exchange identities at the beginning? What if he was the eldest son of the He family from the beginning, and each of them chose their own path? What would it be like now? He Rufei gradually laughed, laughing louder and louder. In the end, he laughed until tears came out of his eyes. He had been pushed forward his whole life, and perhaps only at the last moment of his life could he be free. However, what he left for He Rufei was a bad reputation for deceiving the world. Xiao Huijin, he looked up at the person in front of him. I'll just treat her as He Yen. Didn't you find me at all costs just to stand up for her? If you want my life, fine, take it. He opened his arms and looked like he was ready to be captured. In the end, this is just a grudge between me and her. What does it have to do with you? Xiao Ju walked in front of him and looked at him quietly. Suddenly, he reached out and grabbed his neck. The youth's fingers were white, but it seemed like they could crush his bones. He Rufei could not breathe. He stared at the other person and forced out a cold smile. What does it have to do with me? Xiao Ju asked slowly. His dark eyes stared at He Rufei like a dark storm. He said word by word, this is the first time in my life that I, Xiao Ju, tried to coax a girl that I saved. In the end, she was drowned by you. You tell me, what does it have to do with me? He Rufei struggled with all his might, but the hand tightened. His eyes rolled up and he kicked his legs. Great fear rose from his heart. He knew that he was going to die in this person's hands. But in the next moment, the hand around his neck suddenly loosened. He Rufei hugged his neck and coughed. I won't kill you. Xiao Ju stood up, back facing him, and said coldly, because you don't deserve it. After that, he left He Rufei, who was still holding his throat and gasping for air. In the morning, when He Yen woke up, the snow outside had stopped. Qing Mei called out to Qi Wu in the courtyard. Imperial bodyguard Qi Wu, don't add more firewood. The fire is too big and the medicine won't cook well. Qi Wu silently picked up a few pieces of firewood with a pair of iron tongs. Lin Shuanghe was, after all, a man. It was not good for him to stay in the He family all the time. Moreover, the He family did not have any extra rooms for him to stay in. The medicine this morning was brewed by Qing Mei herself. He Yunxing and He Sui went out early in the morning. Qing Mei fanned the fire with a fan. She, who was usually lively, was a little depressed. He Yen and Fanqing were also like this. After they came back, they fell seriously ill. Although He Sui also invited a doctor and the doctor prescribed medicine, He Yen drank bowl after bowl of medicine. His body did not get better. Instead, it got worse. At that time, Qing Mei thought that He Yen might not survive. However, later on he miraculously got better. She even thought that perhaps Madame's spirit was in heaven. Now He Yen fell ill again. Although the white-robed divine physician, Dr. Lin, said that there was nothing serious, Qing Mei was still worried. Qi Wu saw that she was absent-minded. He thought for a moment and comforted her, "Don't worry. If young Master Lin says that there is nothing wrong, then Madame he will definitely be fine." Not only that, Qing Mei sighed, when I went to change the water in the room this morning, I saw that Miss was crying in her sleep. At that time, it was also like this. If Miss wasn't hurt, how could she be like this? Yesterday, didn't Miss Tianxing Platform and General Fei Hong have a sword duel? How could it be like this? Imperial bodyguard Qi Wu, do you know what happened? Qi Wu shook his head. Regarding He Yen, there were too many incomprehensible and suspicious points about him. However, since Xiao Ju didn't allow them to investigate, they naturally wouldn't deliberately investigate. Master and young master were also very worried yesterday. They really hope that Miss will get better soon, Qing Mei said. The two of them did not deliberately lower their voices, and He Yan's hearing was outstanding, so he heard their conversation clearly. She was stunned for a moment. The woman in her dream had completely disappeared from her sight. The stove in the room was burning brightly. Beside the table, there was a small white porcelain bowl. The small bowl was filled to the brim with candied fruits. The candied plums were bright red and sweet. She slowly reached out and picked one up. She looked at it for a while before putting it into her mouth. It was so sweet that it made her mouth bitter. Qing Mei pushed the door open with the medicine. When she saw that He Yen was awake, she was startled at first. Then she smiled happily. "Miss, you are awake. Do you feel unwell?" "I'm fine." "That's good." Qing Mei put the medicine bowl on the table. She glanced at the small bowl of candied plums and smiled. Military Governor Xiao asked this servant to put it here. He said that the medicine brewed by Dr. Lin is bitter. "Miss, after drinking the medicine, remember to keep 2 in your mouth." He Yen lowered her head and smiled. "Okay." Qing Mei felt that He Yen was a little strange, but she couldn't tell what was wrong. She could only move a stool to sit in front of the bed and nagged him not to catch a cold. Sunlight shone in from the window and the room was inexplicably lively. He Yen looked out of the window. As she looked, she lowered her head and covered her eyes with tears. Everything was over. Chapter 240. General Fei Hong's case caused a huge uproar in the entire Shuo capital. The soldiers and commoners who had received General Fei Hong's favor went to the palace to beg for the truth to be investigated. General Fei Hong had a good reputation among the soldiers and commoners. Once the truth came out, the He and Su families were angered. Emperor Wen Xuan handed the case to the Supreme Court. In a few days, He Yuanliang couldn't take it anymore and revealed the truth. The officers and soldiers also found a lot of evidence of He Rufei and the Wutuo people in the He family. After this case, the He family deceived the monarch, falsely claimed meritorious service, colluded with the enemy and committed treason. Other than General Fei Hong's sister He Xining, all of them were sentenced to death. The main culprit, He Rufei, was sentenced to death by 1,000 cuts. He was sent to the city to be cut 120 times and beheaded. As for the Hanlin Academy scholar Su family, other than Su Zhiheng, all the men were exiled and the women were not enslaved. This case was solved very quickly. After hearing the result, the commoners all clapped their hands and said that the He and Su families deserved it. The day before the execution, Su Zhiheng looked at the rancid food in front of him and didn't want to eat. It was his last meal on the road to the Yellow Springs. The other prisoners had food and wine, but he had nothing. This was because even the jailers felt that Su Zhiheng's actions were too cruel and heartless. There were many people who had received General Fei Hong's favor. Now, even if it was for the dead General He, there were many people who didn't want Su Zhiheng to have an easy time. The jailers mocked him. "Why aren't you eating? After today, you won't be able to eat anymore. I advise you not to be so picky." Hearing this, Su Zhiheng became emotional. He rushed to the door and grabbed the bars. He looked at the jailers outside. "No. I won't die. I'll give you money. Help me find people and ask them to save me. I'll give you money." "Okay." The jailers smiled and looked at him. "Who do you want me to find?" "Find who?" Su Zhiheng suddenly froze. The He clan had already fallen along with them. He Rufei himself could not even protect himself. The colleagues who used to be on good terms with his clan had probably long avoided them, afraid that they would get into trouble. No one could save him. Su Zhiheng collapsed to the ground powerlessly. In his despair, he felt a great sense of unwillingness. He muttered, "Why? I didn't kill anyone. I didn't do anything." "You really didn't do anything?" A voice sounded from the darkness. Su Zhiheng suddenly looked up and saw a person slowly appear in front of him. His entire body was covered in a black cloak. At first, he was overjoyed, thinking that someone had come to save him. But in the next moment, his joy turned into fear, because that person took off the hood of his cloak, revealing his face. It was Marquis Wu Hiyen. Su Zhiheng was startled and quickly retreated until he reached the foot of the wall. He said vigilantly, "Don't come over. Don't come over." The jailers had already left. Hiyen looked at the embarrassed man. Su Zhiheng seemed to be very afraid of her. He stared at her as if he was looking at an evil spirit crawling out of hell, full of horror. Hiyen had never seen Su Zhiheng like this. Whether it was the young man in green who pulled her out of the snow when she was 14 years old and helped her carry her bag with a smile, or the Su Zhiheng who smiled warmly at her after she married him, they were completely different from the man in front of her, who was like a frightened bird with a twang of a bow. Even when He Wanru brought people to drown her, Su Zhiheng did not appear from beginning to end. She had seen Su Zhiheng in his glory days, the Su Zhiheng who looked like a human, but the Su Zhiheng in prison was actually like this. Hiyen was a little disappointed. Just like a general, if he died at the hands of an opponent who was on par with him, he would not regret it. But if there was a huge gap between them, it would make people sigh. "Don't be afraid." Her voice was gentle, and she even showed a little smile. "I'm here because I have something to ask you." The woman's eyes were bright, and there was no hatred in her eyes. But that smile seemed to confuse Su Zhiheng. He still did not move. He stared at Hiyen and hesitated for a long time before asking, "What do you want to ask?" "Do." Hiyen smiled. "When did you find out that your wife Hiyen was General Fei Hong?" Hiyen had never been able to understand this matter. When she married Su Zhiheng, she thought that Su Zhiheng knew nothing about her. In order to cover up the scars on her body, she made up a lot of excuses. She also made up a lot of excuses to show that she was different from ordinary women. It was not until the day she died that she found out from He Wanru that Su Zhiheng had already known. Perhaps all those years of covering up and hiding were like a joke in Su Zhiheng's eyes. But when did he find out? Was it after she married into the Su family, before she married into the Su family, or even earlier? But if that was the case, why did he marry her? Su Zhiheng looked at her evasively, and there was a trace of vigilance in his eyes. "Why do you ask this?" "For you." "I'm the one who can get you out of here," Hiyen said softly. Su Zhiheng's eyes lit up. "Get me out of here?" He took a few steps forward, as if he was afraid of Hiyen. He looked at her through the iron bars and asked anxiously, "Can you really get me out of here?" Hiyen smiled and nodded. He hesitated for a moment, then slowly said, I already knew. When did Su Zhiheng find out that He Yan was General Fei Hong? In fact, it was not long after General Fei Hong returned to the capital. At that time, he was not a Hanlin scholar. Although the Su family was a scholarly family, the position of a Hanlin scholar was not something he could climb up to at his age. Most of the officials in the court were now Su Jingfu's students. Sometimes, talent was secondary to climbing up the ranks. If one did not have connections, sometimes they would not be able to succeed in their lifetime. When he was young, he was known as a child prodigy. As he grew older, people praised him too highly, and he also thought highly of himself. It was like a cage, and he unknowingly trapped himself. Su Zhiheng was temporarily blocked in his official career, and his heart sank. Madame Su saw that he was depressed and thought that with his age, it was time for him to find a marriage. Madame Su was also an astute person. After picking and choosing, she picked General Fei Hong's cousin, the second young miss of the He family. This second young miss's health was not good when she was young, so she was sent to a farmstead to recuperate early on. She also came back not long ago. Madame Su's plan was very good. Becoming in-laws with this new noble of the court would be beneficial to Su Zhiheng's official career. However, at that time, Su Zhiheng was not the best choice for the He family. After all, there were too many talents of the right age in the capital. Because of her relationship with the He family's eldest son, the He family's second young miss was in high demand. There were many people who wanted to marry her. Madame Su took Su Zhiheng to the He family's invitation. Although they said they were guests, they were actually just looking at each other. At that time, he went to the He family for the first time. Coincidentally, a servant poured tea on him, so he went to a dark room to change his clothes. He didn't expect that not long after he went in, someone would come in before he could come out. Su Zhiheng didn't know whether to advance or retreat. There were two people who came in, and they didn't seem to notice that he was behind them. Someone spoke. It was a woman's voice, clear and pleasant. Eldest brother, what is eldest aunt doing? She actually invited these young masters to her home. There are so many young masters. Don't tell me you don't like any of them? A man's voice answered her. Su Zhiheng almost immediately understood that the people talking outside were probably the He family's second young miss and his eldest brother, He Rufei. He should have immediately stood up and apologized, but for some reason, not only did he not move, he also tried his best to hold his breath so that he could hide better. Now that he thought about it, the deep meaning of fate had already begun to appear at that moment. Su Zhiheng heard a secret. Eldest brother, you're in such a hurry to marry me off. Could it be that you're afraid that I'll tell others that we've swapped identities and that I'm General Fei Hong? The woman said, I already said that I won't say anything. Since I've hidden it for so many years, I'll keep hiding it. That's not the case. The man's voice had a hint of impatience. At your age, an ordinary woman should be married. He Yan, you're just living the life you should be living. Behind the screen, Su Zhiheng covered his mouth in horror. What did he just hear? What swapping identities? What He Yan was General Fei Hong. He pinched his arm hard. The pain from his arm reminded him that this wasn't a dream. Su Zhiheng didn't listen to what the siblings were arguing about at the back. It wasn't until the two people left that Su Zhiheng slowly stood up and looked at the closed door. He wasn't stupid. In fact, he was quite smart. With just a few words, he figured out the ins and outs of the matter. He was shocked by the He family's audacity and He Yan's outstanding methods. But more than that, he found an opportunity. A gift from fate. Therefore, he tidied up his clothes and returned to the banquet table. He looked at the He family's second daughter, who had arrived late, and revealed a gentle and refined smile. Su Zhiheng found He Rufei. He Rufei looked at him with an unfathomable expression. Eldest Master Su wants to marry my sister? Su Zhiheng smiled and said, yes. This matter needs to be discussed with the elders, He Rufei said. I can't make the decision alone. It also depends on my sister's thoughts. After saying that, he turned to leave. Su Zhiheng said neither quickly nor slowly, your sister is a heroine. She's not inferior to any man. This one admires her very much. I hope that General He will fulfill our wish. What did you say? He Rufei suddenly looked at him. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Before I came to find General He, I wrote a letter and gave it to a friend. If there is an accident, the secret letter will be spread throughout the capital. Su Zhiheng smiled. I hope that General He will fulfill my wish. He had a card up his sleeve. He was determined to succeed. Just like that, Su Zhiheng married He Yan. Not long before he married He Yan, he became a Hanlin scholar as a dowry that General He gave to his sister. Riches and honor were found in danger. Su Zhiheng naturally understood that the more secrets one knew, the faster one would die. But he didn't think that this kind of thing would happen to him. He was a person who knew when to stop. In the end, he was a civil official, not a general. He Rufei could only help him by becoming a Hanlin scholar at most. He had to walk his own path in the future. As for marrying He Yan, marrying General He's daughter would be beneficial to him. The He family should also be relieved. After all, compared to marrying the second daughter of the He family to another family who might discover the secret, it was better to marry the second daughter of the He family. So, He Yan looked at Su Zhiheng in front of her and slowly said, "From the moment you proposed to marry the second daughter of the He family, you wanted to use her?" Use? Su Zhiheng shook his head. No, it's not using. Even without me, she would still marry. From the beginning to the end, the one who wanted her life wasn't me. I didn't do anything. Su Zhiheng already couldn't remember He Yan's face. Although he married He Yan at that time, he still felt a little disdain in his heart. The etiquette and rules he learned since elementary school made him look down on women like He Yan who deviated from the norm. He liked docile and charming women like He Wan, not He Yan. She was careless. Although she tried her best to pretend to be a lady from a noble family, she would always unconsciously reveal some unsuitable awkwardness. She didn't know how to play the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting, so she couldn't make him proud. She also couldn't learn how to tactfully make him happy. There were even terrible scars on her skin. Sometimes, when Su Zhiheng looked at He Yan, he would think of how she used to eat and sleep with other men in the military camp. He simply couldn't stand it. Although he was willing to be a good husband, more often than not, even he himself couldn't control his disdain. Fortunately, these days soon came to an end. The He family sent a bowl of medicine. After He Yan drank it, she became blind. In fact, at that time, when Su Zhiheng was sitting in the next room and watching He Yan drink the medicine, he felt a little sympathy. The He family's actions were too ruthless. Moreover, if he brought a blind mistress out, what would others say about him behind his back? Fortunately, He Yan was very obedient and didn't make much noise. Even if she was blind, she didn't cry much. Most of the time, she just sat silently in a daze. He heard that before He Yan got married, she had raised a mute dog in the courtyard. Sometimes, Su Zhiheng felt that He Yan and that mute dog were actually very similar. No one cared and they lived in silence. If that was the case, it would be fine. But she worked too hard. She worked so hard that even if she was blind, she still made the He family feel threatened. As a result, she died in the hands of He Wanru in the Su family's pond. I didn't use He Yan. He tried hard to explain. I was protecting her. It's all He Rufei's fault. It's all the He family's fault. He Yan stared at Su Zhiheng and asked, other than at the He family, have you seen the He second miss? Su Zhiheng was stunned and subconsciously shook his head. Oh no. The first time I saw the He second miss was at the He family's residence. He had already forgotten. This was to be expected. He Yan found that when she faced Su Zhiheng now, she was very calm. Perhaps when she faced Su Zhiheng back then, she always thought that she was facing the young man in green that she met on the hunting field. But it turned out that perhaps from the beginning, they were two different people. For Su Zhiheng, He Yan was just an exchange product based on interests. What was important was this identity, not the name or the person. As long as he could become a Hanlin scholar, it didn't make any difference whether he was He Yan or He Xining. A life was nothing more than an official position. She slowly stood up. Su Zhiheng looked at her movements and finally ignored everything else. He grabbed the fence and asked, I've told you everything I know. Can you get me out of here now? His eyes were full of desire, just like when he stumbled upon the He family's secret and wanted to use it to add glory to his official career. He Yen bent down slightly and looked into his eyes. I lied to you. Su Zhiheng was stunned. I didn't do anything. I just lied to you. Her eyes curved. You also lied to me. This is very fair. After that, she straightened up and left. Su Zhiheng's angry shout came from afar, but He Yen pretended that she didn't hear it. She walked out step by step, as if she was leaving her past life step by step. From now on, Marquis Wu and He Yen and the He family's second miss had nothing to do with each other. The last question about her previous life was finally answered. He Yen didn't feel much at the moment. It was as if these people and these things couldn't withstand the waves in her heart anymore. It was just that her heart was empty. A person stood at the gate outside the prison with his back to her. His posture was as straight as the sword at his waist. He was looking sideways at the snow piled up under the eaves, revealing a beautiful silhouette. He Yen stood in place and looked at the back of the person. Unknowingly, her heart slowly filled up. It was as if the emptiness that she couldn't step on finally had a sense of reality at this moment. The traveler who couldn't find his way finally found a little light in his aimless search. He Yen walked over and called out softly, Xiao Ju. He turned around and glanced at He Yen. Are you done? He Yen nodded. Tomorrow was the day of the execution. There was nothing left to say between her and He Rufei, and between He Yuansheng and his wife. However, she still wanted to know when Su Zhiheng found out about her identity. So she asked Xiao Ju to bring her here to see Su Zhiheng for the last time. Why did you talk for so long? Xiao Ju frowned. Was it long? He Yen asked curiously. Why do I feel like it wasn't long? This is already very convenient. He Yen glanced and saw Xiao Ju's expression. He stopped talking at the right time. After a moment of silence, she secretly tugged at Xiao Ju's sleeve. Are you angry again? What's there to talk about with that kind of person? Xiao Ju turned around and walked forward. He Yen chased after her. There's nothing to talk about, but after thinking about it, I feel that it's too easy for him to just let it go. So I said that I'm a malicious spirit who came back for revenge and scared him half to death. Am I very powerful? She casually made up a story. Don't lie. I'm not lying to you. It's true. You should have seen his expression when he was scared by me just now. The girl chattered non-stop beside him. The gloominess she had when she came out just now had completely disappeared. He saw this and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He deliberately ignored her and let her talk nonsense. Xiao Ju, it's not good to get angry so easily. You have to change it. I'm not angry. You're not angry. You're just unhappy. Xiao Ju, what are you doing? She grabbed the corner of his sleeve. Nothing. Chapter 241. Although Emperor Wenxian allowed Xiao Ju to bury Madame He Er, but Madame He Er was still a sinner and couldn't be made public. On the day He Rufei and Su Zhiheng were executed, Madame He Er was buried. Madame He Er's grave was in a quiet forest on the Donghuang mountain in the capital. There were pear trees everywhere. When spring came, the pear blossoms would bloom and the birds would roost. It should be a beautiful scene. She was like all the noble ladies in the capital. She followed her father at home and followed her husband after marriage. She was trapped in the eaves of the four corners of the house and couldn't decide her own fate. Perhaps death, to her, was a kind of relief. On the stone tablet, it was written, therefore, the tomb of Dehui Yun. Madame He Er's surname was Yun. Now that she had passed away, He Yen ordered people to carve this stone tablet. He thought that even if she died, Madame He Er wouldn't want to have any entanglements with the He family. She squatted down in front of Madame He Er's grave and gently touched the words on the tablet. She whispered, if there is an afterlife, mother, please don't be a woman. If you must be a woman, she smiled, let me be the mother and mother be the daughter. The mother and daughter were not fated to be together in this life. They didn't even have a good conversation. And from today onwards in this world, there was no one other than Xiao Ju who knew that she was He Yen. Xiao Ju stood a few steps away. Madame He's identity was sensitive. Xiao Ju buried Madame He air at this time. She was already spiteful by the imperial censors. A woman's voice sounded behind him. You? He Yen turned around and saw He Xining in plain clothes. He Xining looked a lot more haggard. She used to be a beautiful girl, but now she was as thin as a skeleton. Her eyes were red and swollen, probably because she had been crying for a long time. When she saw He Yen and Xiao Ju's faces clearly, she was stunned and stood there uneasily. After a while, she said, "Military Governor Xiao, Miss He." "Su." He Yen suddenly stopped. "Miss He." Su Zhiheng was already dead. There was no Su family, and there was no eldest Madame Su. He Xining's gaze fell on the tombstone in front of the grave. In an instant, his voice choked. "Is this my mother?" He Yen nodded slightly. He Xining took 2 or 3 steps forward and knelt down in front of the tomb with a plop. He hugged the tombstone and refused to let go. That day, an unfamiliar guard took her out of prison and sent her to the residence of Wei Xianzhang, the curator of the Virtuous Prosperity Hall. Wei Xianzhang stayed in the academy all year round, and only his wife and little granddaughter were at home. Madame Wei was very gentle with her and was very sympathetic to her experience. After He Xining settled down in the Wei family, she gradually pieced together the whole story from the mouths of the servants. It was no different from what she had imagined. The incomprehensible things of the past had all been answered. Why was the masked big brother always so cold to her, and why was the big brother, who took off the mask, so patient and gentle to her? It was because the masked big brother was actually the dead big sister. She thought that the big sister, who was recuperating in the manor, was actually the real big brother. No wonder her big sister became blind not long after marrying into the Su family. How could there be such a coincidence in the world? It was just man-made. After her big sister passed away, her mother fell seriously ill and became depressed. It turned out that the truth was so terrifying and disgusting. What about her? Her big sister had already died, her mother had also left, the He family was no longer around, and the Su family was also scattered. She had been arranged by her biological father to marry Su Zhiheng. It turned out that she was also a substitute for her big sister, a substitute for the He family and the Su family. This marriage must not be broken. Now that she was alone, where could she go? What could she do? He Xining hugged the tombstone and cried bitterly. She hoped that Madame He was still alive, at least she had someone to rely on. But now, she really had no one to rely on. She suddenly thought of He Yen, who was alone in the Su family back then. Was it the same? He was pushed into the abyss by his own family and had no comrades to rely on by his side? He couldn't see the ugly expressions on people's faces, nor could he guess their sinister intentions. He was so lonely and pitiful. He Yen looked at her crying sadly and hesitated for a moment. Finally, he walked to He Xining's side, bent down, and gently patted her back. She knew the feeling of being homeless better than anyone else. She understood very well how He Xining felt at this moment. He Xining cried for a long time before turning her head. He Yen handed her a handkerchief. She took it and said, "Thank you." Then she looked at the tombstone and said, "This inscription?" It was as if it was carved in the name of a child for a mother. "I ordered someone to carve it," Xiao Ju said lightly. "Your big sister and I were classmates, so I carved the inscription on her behalf." He Xining was stunned and whispered, "Thank you." She turned to look at the tombstone with a complicated expression. She really, even if she's not here anymore, she can still protect me at all times. She and He Yen didn't actually spend much time together. Even if she vaguely guessed the truth at the time, she was more shocked than angry. But now, at a time when no one could help her, the warmth left behind by her elder sister's death was enough to make her feel a trace of comfort. Whether it was Wei Xianzhang or Xiao Huijin, it was because of He Yen that they protected her so much. If only He Yen was still alive. He Xining suddenly wanted to know what kind of person He Yen was. The only few times she had interacted with He Yen was when she was wearing the mask. Later, when she returned to the Fu, He Yen hurriedly got married. She didn't have the time and didn't have the opportunity to understand He Yen. He Xining thought that He Yen must be a very good person to be able to make these people help her even after He Yan's death. She shouldn't be as weak as he was. She shouldn't be able to find a way forward in despair. What do you plan to do in the future? He Yen asked her. He Xining came back to her senses and shook her head. She said blankly, I don't know. She really didn't know how to move forward in the future. Don't worry, He Yen said softly, you can think about it slowly. When you understand, you can do it. He Xining smiled bitterly, can I still have a future? A woman who was once the wife of a criminal, a woman whose family betrayed the country. Even if she was lucky enough to survive, what could she do? She also wanted to die with her family, but when it came to it, she couldn't muster up the courage. You can. The woman in front of her looked at her and said warmly, you are the daughter of Second Madam He and General Fei Hong's sister. You can do what she can do. He Xining subconsciously raised her head and looked at He Yen. This woman. She had seen her at Yuhua Temple before, but at that time, she was attracted by Xiao Huijin beside her and didn't look at her carefully. However, Second Madam He and He Yen had exchanged a few words. Speaking of which, Marwu and in front of her was also fated to be with her elder sister. She also disguised herself as a man and entered the military camp. Her name was exactly the same. Perhaps because of this, God wanted to use her to redress the injustice of her elder sister. He Xining suddenly felt close to the woman in front of her, even though they had only met a few times. He Yen pulled her up from the ground. I know you are living in Teacher Wei's residence now. If you need help in the future, you can ask someone to tell me. Why are you so good to me? He Xining couldn't help but ask. He Yen smiled. My fiancé was once your elder sister's classmate. It is reasonable for me to take care of you. Moreover, I only have a younger brother and no younger sister. In the future, you can treat me as your elder sister. Although I am not as powerful as General Fei Hong, she said, I will take care of you for her. Inexplicably, He Xining felt a sense of relief in her heart. It was as if she had finally found a small boat in a lonely and helpless sea. Thank you very much, she said. Let's go and burn incense for Second Madam He first. He Yen smiled. After burning incense for Second Madam He and burning paper money, Xiao Ju and He Yen sent He Xining back to Wei Xuanzhang's residence. Looking at He Xining's back, He Yen sighed softly. What's wrong? Xiao Ju asked her. I just feel a little sorry for her. He Yen turned around and walked home with Xiao Ju. I remember that when she was in the He family, her temperament was very innocent and lively. He Yuan Liang, she refused to call him father, always doted on her a lot. I used to be secretly jealous of her, but in the end, she was also treated as a sacrifice of the He family. He Yen grew up alone and saw the coldness and ruthlessness of the He family early on. Therefore, it was not difficult for him to accept the day the truth was revealed. However, He Xining had lived in a lie since she was young. The little girl who was pampered and raised would one day discover the ugly truth of the world. He thought that she would be especially devastated. Xiao Ju comforted her, she will come out of it. As they walked, a passerby passed by and seemed to be talking about the execution in the city today. He Yen heard someone say, when Su Zhiheng was pushed onto the execution platform, he was so scared that he peed his pants. It was too funny. He Rufei was even worse. 120 cuts. Just thinking about it makes me feel pain. Serves them right. Who told them to do such a disloyal and unjust thing? They are simply heartless and unscrupulous. It's just a pity for General Fei Hong. How many years has it been since the Great Wei produced such a talented general? Furthermore, she was a woman, yet she was killed by them. Your Majesty's actions can be considered as taking revenge for General Fei Hong. This is called, every wrong has its perpetrator and every debt has its debtor. It's not that they won't take revenge, it's just not time yet. He Yen listened to the discussions of the passers-by and was momentarily stunned. She did not go to watch the execution. For her, it was enough that the guilty received their retribution. Watching the execution did not make her feel happy. Revenge was not the purpose of her life. People should learn to look forward. Only by looking forward would there be a future. Xiao Ju, He Yan said, what do you plan to do about Prime Minister Su's case? Xiao Ju's gaze paused. After a while, he said, it's about time. General Fei Hong's case, from the discovery of the truth to the execution of the guilty, happened very quickly. After all, He Rufei was guilty of the most heinous crimes. It was understandable that he was punished this way. However, Prime Minister Su, who was left to be interrogated, made things a little awkward. Su Jingfu's disciples were all over the imperial court. Although they did not dare to say it directly, there were many people who ran around for him these days. Most of them used Su Jingfu's contributions to Emperor Wenxuan's ascension to the throne. He also said that a few letters and He Rufei's confession couldn't convict Su Jingfu, and that Su Jingfu was framed. But soon, General Fengyun Xiao Huaijin personally brought two people up from the throne room. They were the survivors of the Battle of Mingshui, a pair of brothers surnamed Luo. In front of all the civil and military officials, the Luo brothers told Emperor Wenxuan the truth of the Battle of Mingshui. It turned out that Su Jingfu had secretly colluded with a spy in the Xiao family's army and deliberately sent the military map to the southern barbarians. The reason why Xiao Zhongwu was defeated in the Battle of Mingshui was not because of improper command. It was because Su Jingfu's people had shot arrows in the back and wiped out the entire army. When these words came out, the entire imperial court was shocked. Emperor Wenxuan flew into a rage in front of all the officials. Everyone knew that Xiao Zhongwu was defeated in the Battle of Mingshui. The Xiao family was almost unable to recover from the setback. If not for Xiao Huaijin's determination to go all out and lead 3,000 soldiers and horses into the southern barbarians, there would be no General Fengyun in Dawei today. After the Battle of Mingshui, the civil and military officials both openly and secretly criticized Xiao Zhongwu for being obstinate and self-opinionated. Among them, the one who criticized him the most was Su Jingfu. Emperor Wenxuan also let the Xiao family sit on the bench for a long time. Now that the truth was out, it was really Su Jingfu behind the scenes. On one hand, it made the old subordinates who used to follow Xiao Zhongwu bitterly disappointed. On the other hand, it made people feel that Emperor Wenxuan could not distinguish between loyalty and treachery, and was absurd and unreasonable. Emperor Wenxuan was furious. He ordered the Supreme Court to thoroughly investigate the entire Su family and reopen the old case of the Battle of Mingshui. He would not rest until the truth came to light. This way, the original Su party members were in danger. Their house was about to collapse. No one cared about whether Prime Minister Su was Prime Minister Su or not. They wanted nothing more than to cut off all their past ties with Su Jingfu. At the same time, everyone was even more afraid of the legendary jade-faced governor. He had been lying low for so many years and had never given up on investigating this matter. Who knew if Xiao Huaijin had other evidence in his hands? It was not easy to uproot an old tree that had been growing for many years. However, looking at Xiao Huaijin's momentum, it was clear that he wanted to settle accounts after the autumn and did not intend to let anyone off. In the Crown Prince's residence, the Guang Yan restlessly paced back and forth in the hall. The servants all knelt at the side, not daring to speak. These days, the Crown Prince's temper had become worse. A few days ago, he even hit the Crown Princess. Everyone knew who he was angry for. The Crown Prince and Prime Minister Su had been friends for many years. Prime Minister Su had always supported the Crown Prince. If Prime Minister Su fell from power, it would be no different from cutting off one of his own arms. However, that old man was cunning. After so many years, it was not like he did not have any evidence. If he were to be dragged down as well, the Crown Prince clenched his fists, his expression becoming increasingly gloomy. The Guang Yan would definitely not let go of this opportunity. When they were on the Heavenly Star platform, the Guang Yan had added fuel to the fire in He Rufei's case. Now that both the He and Su families had fallen, if the Su family was next, then wouldn't the Crown Prince be next? Wow, all of them had probably planned for this day to come a long time ago. If they were to succeed at this time, wouldn't all their efforts be for naught? However, Emperor Wenxuan was currently in a fit of anger. He could not speak up for Su Jingfu at this juncture. Moreover, the evidence in the Mingshui case was conclusive. Right now, Xiao Huijin was flushed with success. The crown prince could only avoid the sharp edge and did not dare to fight head-on. Just as he was thinking, a maidservant came in from outside. She walked in front of him and softly said, "Is your highness worried about Prime Minister Su?" At this juncture, the only person who dared to speak to him was his favored maidservant, Ying Xiang. The Guangyan glanced at Ying Xiang. Today, he was not in the mood to flirt with the beauty. He only said, "That's right. If you ask this maidservant, isn't this a good thing?" Ying Xiang helped the Guangyan sit down on the soft couch and gently massaged his shoulders. "Does your highness think that Prime Minister Su's hands are too big? Now that Prime Minister Su is in trouble, your highness should have fewer worries in the future." "What do you know?" The Guangyan said impatiently, "Su Jingfu is this crown prince's person. If something happens to him, this crown prince will have to cut off one of my own arms. All my previous years of planning will be for naught. Is your highness worried that after Prime Minister Su is gone, there will be no one to replace him?" Ying Xiang said with a smile, "Doesn't Prime Minister Su still have a son-in-law? Fourth young Master Chu has been with Prime Minister Su for so many years. If he can protect himself this time, it's not impossible for him to take over Prime Minister Su's position." Chu's Island? The Guangyan was slightly startled. He intended to rope in Chu's Island. However, these days, one thing after another happened. He had forgotten about Chu's Island. Now that he heard Ying Xiang's reminder, he suddenly remembered what Meningbu had said in his residence. With the same methods and connections, a young eagle is easier to train than an adult poisonous snake, isn't it? Chu's Island was personally taught by Su Jingfu. Compared to Su Jingfu's viciousness, he looked more gentle and harmless. However, over the years, he had done many things for Su Jingfu. No one would look down on him. Otherwise, he would really be a useless person. Why would Su Jingfu marry the apple of his eye to Chu's Island? His gaze moved to the beautiful face of the servant in front of him. He suddenly reached out and grabbed Ying Xiang's wrist. He pulled her into his arms and asked, "Chu's Island is Su Jingfu's student. Once Su Jingfu falls, Chu's Island won't be able to escape. How do you know that he will escape this disaster?" This servant was just speaking casually. Ying Xiang did not struggle. Her face still maintained a respectful smile. She nestled in his arms and softly said, "After all, this servant used to be this servant's master." The Guangyan stared at her for a while. He sneered and pinched Ying Xiang's chin, forcing her to look directly at him. This prince hates betrayal the most. Ying Xiang, in the entire residence, you are this prince's most beloved servant. I hope that you know in your heart what you should do and what you shouldn't do. If this prince finds out that you have an affair with an outsider behind this prince's back, you have to know." His smile looked a bit sinister. "The number of women who have died in the crown prince's residence is not one more than you." Ying Xiang smiled sweetly and said, "Your highness is scaring this servant again. This servant was born to be your highness's person and will die to be your highness's ghost. How could I have an affair with someone else? However, your highness, you must not forget the old because you have a new person." The beauty looked bright and moving. Her pair of eyes were obedient and there was nothing suspicious about it. "As long as you are obedient," the Guangyan touched her face with satisfaction, "this prince will always dote on you." Ying Xiang smiled and lowered her head. On her slender wrist, there was an obvious bruise because of the Guangyan's actions just now. She quietly used her sleeve to cover the bruise and buried her head in the Guangyan's chest, hiding the deep meaning in her eyes. Chapter 242. There was more and more evidence about Prime Minister Su's involvement in the Battle of Mingshui. It wasn't just the Battle of Mingshui. There were all sorts of crimes that were presented to the court, including selling official positions and titles, hiring private servants, deceiving the emperor, accepting bribes. The change in the emperor's attitude made Su's party feel that something was wrong. The court was immersed in a tense atmosphere. Those who originally thought that they would be able to rescue Su Jingfu soon realized that it was not a simple matter. In other words, it was impossible. In Count Shurjin's residence, a servant stopped the people who wanted to come in and said with a smile, "Sirs, please go back. Fourth young master is not in the residence." Where did Chu Xilan go? One person was anxious and angry. He asked in a low voice, "If you don't let us see fourth young master Chu, the prime minister won't have time." The servant only said with a bitter face, "Sirs, I don't know. Fourth young master hasn't been back for a long time." Seeing that they couldn't get anything useful out of the servant, the person could only leave resentfully. After the group of people left, the servant closed the door and went back to the courtyard. He knocked on the door of the study and walked in. Chu Zhao was sitting at the table, reading. "Fourth young master, the people who came have all been sent back," the servant said. Chu Zhao was of course in Count Shurjin's residence. In fact, he hadn't left the residence these days, so no one saw him. "Well done." "But fourth young master," the servant hesitated and asked, "Are you really not going to think of a way?" Chu Zhao looked up at him. The servant's face paled. After a while, he heard the person in front of him say, "You can go out." The servant left as if relieved of a heavy burden. Chu Zhao's gaze fell on the table again. The ink stone on the table was given to him by Su Jingfu. Ever since Su Jingfu was imprisoned, there were people who wanted to find him to help Su Jingfu get out. After all, Su Jingfu treated him like his own son. He was going to be Su Jingfu's son-in-law soon. It was reasonable for him to do this. Chu Zhao's gaze became distant. Chu Zhao still remembered the first time he met Su Jingfu. At that time, he was still young and was being bullied by Madame Chu and his 3 brothers. He was very good-looking, and Chu Linfeng liked to take him to social gatherings. He looked very good, but every time he came back from social gatherings, what awaited him was endless torture. Chu Linfeng couldn't see what was happening in the backyard. Even if she saw it, she would only say a few words. It was impossible for her to leave Mrs. Chu because of him. There was a winter day when Chu Linfeng had to entertain his colleagues and wanted to bring him along. This time, he was a guest at Prime Minister Su's residence. Chu Linfeng had specifically instructed Madame Chu to pick out a good set of clothes for Chu Zhao so that he wouldn't embarrass the Chu family. Since he was going to be a guest at Prime Minister Su's residence, Madame Chu didn't dare to neglect him. Even though she was extremely unwilling, she still prepared gorgeous clothes for him. Chu Linfeng was quite satisfied. But Chu Zhao had a hard time walking. He didn't know if it was Madame Chu or one of his brothers who had nailed a few nails into the bottom of his boots. At first, he couldn't feel it, but as he walked, the nails gradually drilled into his boots and finally drilled into the soles of his feet. But at that time, Chu Zhao had already arrived at Su's residence with Chu Linfeng. It was very rude to take off one's boots in public. Chu Linfeng was very proud and didn't give him a chance to speak at all. It was like showing off a beautiful vase or an exquisite decoration. He pulled him along and said to everyone he met, "This is my 3rd son, Chu Zhao." Chu Zhao could only endure the pain and talk to Chu Linfeng with a pale face. In the end, he almost couldn't hold on anymore. Chu Linfeng drank a few more cups at the banquet and talked with his colleagues proudly. Finally, he didn't pay attention to Chu Zhao for the time being. Chu Zhao wanted to find a secluded corner to take off his boots and pull out the nails. But he didn't know the way in the huge Su residence. As he walked around, he bumped into someone. An old scribe in a long gown looked down at him. Chu Zhao froze. He recognized at a glance that this was the main character of today's banquet, Prime Minister Su Jingfu, whom Chu Linfeng wanted to curry favor with. But he was always by Chu Linfeng's side, and Chu Linfeng didn't even talk to Su Jingfu. It seemed that he didn't know him. "I am the 4th son of Count Shurjin's residence," Chu Zhao said carefully. "I'm lost." Su Jingfu only smiled at him. His gaze paused and he suddenly asked, "What's wrong with your leg?" Chu Zhao instinctively hid his leg behind him. Su Jingfu looked around and called for the servants. "Carry 4th young Master Chu to his room." Chu Zhao hurriedly waved his hand. "No need, you'll be crippled if you keep walking." Su Jingfu shook his head and smiled. "I'll have someone tell your father. Don't worry." Chu Zhao was carried into the room by the servants of the Su residence. Not only that, they also took off his boots. The moment the boots were taken off, Everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. The nails were almost completely buried in his foot. The blood that flowed out stuck to his white socks. Just looking at it made one feel miserable. Prime Minister Su frowned and said, "Call the doctor from the mansion over." There was a physician in the Su residence who was skilled in medicine. After being called over, he removed the nail from Chu Zhao's foot and said, "Young master, you're too good at enduring. The nail didn't go in, but it hurts. How did you endure until now without making a sound? When you go back, don't go to the fields for a few days. Rest well." Chu Zhao pursed his lips and didn't speak. Although he was the fourth young master of the Chu family, his life was no different from that of a servant. He had to work every day. How could he not go to the fields to recuperate? Su Jingfu waved his hand and dismissed them. He got up and walked to the other side. He seemed to ask casually, "What's your name?" "Chu Zhao, courtesy name Xilan." He restrained himself and answered cautiously, "Good name." Su Jingfu smiled and placed a brand new pair of boots in front of him. "My wife originally planned to give this to my student. Your boots can't be worn anymore. This pair should be able to be worn." Chu Zhao held the boots in his arms. Perhaps it was because the stove in front of him was very hot. The cloth boots were warmed. He said, "Thank you, Lord Su." Su Jingfu looked at him. The clothes that Madame Chu gave him were indeed gorgeous and exquisite. However, in the cold winter, the thin brocade clothes didn't have any cotton wool. It looked good, but it wasn't practical. He had walked outside. His face was pale from the cold, and his hands and feet were cold. "You have 3 older brothers in your family?" Su Jingfu asked with a smile. Chu Zhao's body stiffened slightly. Su Jingfu looked at him thoughtfully. "I've never seen your father bring them out." Chu Linfeng cared a lot about his reputation. He always thought that he was the most handsome man in Dawei. His 3 sons were born as ordinary as their mother. He was afraid that others would laugh at him behind his back. Therefore, he only brought Chu Zhao to socialize with his colleagues. Chu Zhao lowered his head and didn't speak. Su Jingfu asked, "Have you ever studied?" "I've read a little." He answered softly. Su Jingfu was slightly surprised. He probably thought that it was unbelievable that Madame Chu would let an outsider like Chu Linfeng study. Chu Zhao thought for a moment and said softly, "I've learned a little from my mother. Later, when I returned home, I secretly hid some books in my room." Su Jingfu had always been fond of talents. He looked at the exceptionally beautiful child in front of him and smiled. "Since that's the case, you can come and study under me in the future." Chu Zhao was stunned. He raised his head subconsciously and stammered, I have many students, but they're all old. I haven't taken in any more students for many years." The scholar's face was gentle, like a loving elder. "I'm old. I don't know how many more years I can teach you. If you're willing to learn from me, you can call me teacher." Teacher. A teacher was to teach, receive, and dispel doubts. Unfortunately, in his past years, no one had ever taught him what to do or why to do so. And the person in front of him was the Prime Minister of Great Wei, whose power could overturn the court. He lowered his head, ignoring the wounds he had just bandaged. He got off the ground and kowtowed respectfully to Su Jingfu. He called out, "Teacher?" He was sent back by Su Jingfu's carriage. Along with him were the servants of the Su family, a thick cotton coat, and a pair of brand new boots. Chu Linfeng was shocked when he heard about this when he sobered up. He hurriedly apologized to Su Jingfu. Su Jingfu told him not to take it to heart. After Chu Linfeng returned home, this was the first time he had an argument with Madame Chu over Chu Zhao. The sound of their quarrel fell into the ears of Chu Zhao outside the courtyard window. "That's Prime Minister Su. Xilan will be his student in the future. Don't you understand what Prime Minister Su is doing? Don't bully Xilan in the future." "Who bullied him? If I did, how could I let him become Prime Minister Su's student?" "You're biased. Otherwise, why would it be him and not my child? Who told them to be so useless? Prime Minister Su likes Xilan. You're on your own. Don't embarrass yourself." The sound of quarreling filled his ears. Chu Zhao lowered his head to look at the cloth boots on his feet. The boots fit well and the soles were very soft. It seemed that even the pain of the nails piercing into his flesh was completely soothed by the softness of the soles. After that, he became Su Jingfu's student. Su Jingfu indeed treated him very well, and he was not willing to give up this opportunity. He studied with all his might. Everyone said that he was brimming with talent and that he was promising at a young age, but no one knew how many nights he had to burn the midnight oil to be able to carelessly, humble, in front of others. The friendship between a teacher and a student was not unprecedented. The oil lamp on the table cast a shadow on the wall. He looked at it for a while and stood up. Servants. A servant came in and said, "Fourth young master, what are your orders?" "Prepare a horse." He looked forward. "We're going to the crown prince's residence." In the spacious bedchamber, Emperor Wenxuan leaned against the edge of the bed. He lowered his head and drank the ginseng soup with a woman's hand. Ever since Su Jingfu's case came out, the emperor was extremely angry and his health was deteriorating. He was old to begin with, but in the past he had lived a leisurely life, so it was hard to tell. The changes in the court had piled up and smashed against him one after another. In just a short dozen days, he looked like an old man. After finishing the ginseng soup, Concubine Lan asked the servant girl to take away the empty bowl. She said softly, "Your Majesty, you have to get better soon." "What's the use of getting better?" Emperor Wenxuan smiled bitterly. "I'm afraid that the outside world can't wait for me to." A finger pressed against his lips and stopped him from speaking. Concubine Lan shook her head disapprovingly. "Your Majesty, you can't say this casually." Emperor Wenxuan looked at the woman in front of him. Although she said this, her expression was still gentle. She was not like the other concubines who were frightened and angry. She was also not like Empress Zhang who scolded with a stern face. Concubine Lan was not the most beautiful in the entire harem, but he doted on the woman in front of him for so many years because he could be himself in front of Concubine Lan. Instead of being an emperor, Emperor Wenxuan thought that he might be the only one who thought that being an emperor was tiring. After he fell ill, Empress Zhang only came once. Emperor Wenxuan knew that Empress Zhang's family was very close to Su Jingfu. Now that Su Jingfu was in trouble, Empress Zhang's family did not dare to publicly plead for Su Jingfu. The harem was also not allowed to interfere with politics. Therefore, she should be very busy during this period. Emperor Wenxuan did not have the mood to care about these things. He turned a blind eye because he could feel that he did not have much time left. It was strange. Before Su Jingfu's case, he thought that he was still energetic and could live longer than his father. However, after Su Jingfu's case, he understood that he was really old. He was so old that he might not live to see the next winter. Therefore, in his opinion, there was another important matter. Since I ascended the throne, Su Jingfu has been assisting me for many years. He said slowly, "I treated him with tolerance. Although I knew that he was selfish, I did not pursue it. But now, it seems that he failed to live up to my trust. He even betrayed the country. Xiao Zhongwu is dead. All these years, I have listened to Su Jingfu's words. Now, Dewei does not have many capable generals. That General Fei Hong, He Rufei, is a fake. Yudo has long been premeditated. I am afraid that he will become a big problem in the future. With the Crown Prince's character, if I pass this position to him." Emperor Wenxuan laughed bitterly. "He is not as good as I am. Although I am indecisive, I am still a benevolent person." "What does he have?" The last sentence was filled with both disappointment and anger. If the Guangxuo was the Crown Prince, how good would it be? If that was the case, he might have handed the position to Guangxuo a long time ago. Although the emperor was mediocre, he was not particularly stupid. He knew that his eldest son was not talented or virtuous. After so many years, he was not willing to draft an edict to pass down the throne because he was conflicted. On one hand, he knew very well that the Guang Yan sitting on this position was a disaster for Dewei. On the other hand, there had never been a monarch in the Great Wei who abolished the old and established the young. He did not seek merit in his life, only seeking not to make mistakes. He did not want to be the first person, and he was also afraid of shouldering this responsibility. Therefore, he delayed it again and again, endured it again and again, and finally, things had reached the point of no return. Long, he looked at concubine Lan, I regret not making this decision sooner. Now, no matter what he did, it would create a huge wave in the court. More blood would be spilled and more people would die. Between the Guang Yen and the Guang Shua, no matter who he favored, it would be his son. There was no doubt about this. Concubine Lan gently held his hand and said, No matter what your majesty decides, I understand your majesty's painstaking efforts. Emperor Wenxian looked at her. In this palace, you are the only one who understands me. When concubine Lan returned to Qinglan Palace, the Guang Shua was already waiting for her in the main hall. Seeing her return, the Guang Shua stood up. Mother. Concubine Lan had him sit down and asked, How come you have time to come here? Aren't you going to the Supreme Court? Now that Prime Minister Su's case had reached this point, if there were no other changes, it could be considered as the end result. Xiao Huaijin threw out the evidence in his hands one after another, and the officials who had been suppressed by Su's party in the past hurriedly seized this opportunity. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. This had been the case since ancient times. Of course, the Guang Shua added fuel to the fire. I have already been there today. The Guang Shua thought for a moment. These days, I have been working hard on Prime Minister Su's case. However, when I saw Military Governor Xiao in the palace, he did not show any intention of getting close to me. He did not understand whether Xiao Huaijin owed him a favor or not. Concubine Lan smiled. It is right for him to ignore you. Mother's meaning is, you are concerned about Su Jingfu's case because you are a prince of the Dowei and are concerned about court matters. If you get too close to him, it will be too deliberate. I know, the Guang Shua's eyes flashed with a trace of anxiety, but the Crown Prince will not let the matter rest. Father Emperor's health is not good. I heard that an imperial censor has already submitted a memorial to Father Emperor to appoint an heir as soon as possible. Mother, you know Father Emperor's personality? The Guang Shua laughed self-deprecatingly. If there is nothing else, he will definitely appoint the Crown Prince's heir. Just as Mother said, once the Crown Prince ascends the throne, not to mention me and Mother, even fifth brother will not be able to survive. Also, his eyes were heavy with worry. The Yudo's ambitions are unclear and could attack the Dowei at any time. When that time comes, if the Crown Prince ascends the throne, does Mother think that the Crown Prince will order people to oppose the Yudo? Even if it is to pull down Xiao Huaijin, he will not say the word war. The concubine Lan quietly waited for him to finish. The Guang Shua looked at the woman. Mother, do you think that I am wrong? You are very right. The concubine Lan smiled. When I saw your Father Emperor today, your Father Emperor had already expressed his intention of drafting an imperial edict to pass the throne. The Guang Shua's heart jumped, and he asked somewhat excitedly, What exactly? Actually, it is not important who your Father Emperor decides to pass the throne to, the concubine Lan said. In this world, sometimes an imperial edict cannot decide anything. In the Guang Shua, the hearts of the people are more important than power. You have never openly participated in court matters, hiding behind the Crown Prince. This is your weakness, but it is also your strength. You are anxious right now, but I am afraid that the Guang Yen is even more anxious than you. There are also those Yudo. Whether or not Xiao Huaijin is willing to get close to you and support you, there is no meaning in talking about this now. If he does not have the desire to fight for power, he will become one of your people sooner or later. The Guang Shua asked, Because of the Crown Prince? A trace of pity flashed through the concubine Lan's eyes. The Guang Yen is so tyrannical and unruly. Someone like Xiao Huaijin will definitely not be willing to be ordered around by him. There is no one left in the Dowei. Chapter 243. In the prison, Su Jingfu sat quietly. When he first entered, the jailers were very respectful to him and did not dare to slight him. Although he was shocked by Xiao Huaijin's swift and decisive methods, he was not anxious. Chu Zhao was outside, and Emperor Wenxuan was gentle. Even if he could not escape unscathed, he could at least slowly turn the tables. However, recently, the jailer's attitude towards him had gradually changed. Su Jingfu was a person who had been in the imperial court for so many years. Sometimes, he could tell a person's situation had changed just by looking at their eyes. These days, no one came to visit him, so he had no way of knowing the situation outside. Su Jingfu did not care about himself, but he did not know how Su Pingting and Madame Su were doing. Su Pingting had been spoiled since birth and had not experienced much hardship. He did not know how Emperor Wenshuan was dealing with them. Su Jingfu did not show it on his face, but he was already anxious. The crown prince of the Guangyan was not very useful, and because of the Yuto incident, he was estranged from him. He probably did not dare to say anything now. When he thought of this, Su Jingfu was secretly disdainful. If it were not for the fact that there was no one in the imperial court, he would not support this idiot Guangyan. However, it had been so long. Could it be that Chu Zhao still had not thought of a way? Or could it be that Chu Zhao was also in trouble now? Su Jingfu was getting a little irritated. The longer he stayed in prison, the worse it was for him. He did not know what Xiaoju had done, and Emperor Wenshuan, no matter how benevolent he was still an emperor. When he was not around, the other officials would teach the emperor what to do. There would always be people who wanted to drag him down. He had to think of another way. However, the most important thing now was to see his people first. Su Jingfu was thinking when his vision blurred. He seemed to see someone flash past the dark corner of the prison cell. When he looked again, there was nothing. It was snowing outside, and the jailers were squatting at the door of the cell drinking. The alcohol temporarily dispelled the cold, and the chatter and laughter gradually died down. The torches burning on the wall quietly emitted a faint light. There seemed to be a small crackling sound in the fire, like the sound of burning things. Gradually, the sound became indistinct. After a long time, a scream pierced through the night sky. "It's on fire! There was a fire! There's a fire in the prison! Quick, put out the fire!" The smoke made people's throats itch, and the raging fire burned in an instant. Everyone was talking at once, and there were sounds of people splashing water to put out the fire. There were also people's voices, accompanied by the sounds of swords clashing. "Help! Someone is trying to break out of prison. Prime Minister Su has been kidnapped." The carriage stopped at some point, and Su Jingfu was pushed into a courtyard. It looked like a farm in the wilderness, and there were no other houses around. As soon as he entered, Su Jingfu coughed. He was old and couldn't withstand such torment. Half of his beard was burned off by the fire, and his clothes were blackened by the fire. He looked particularly miserable. There was no one else in the room. There was tea and food on the table, and it looked quite exquisite. He didn't touch it. At any time, it was always good to be cautious. When he came, he had already asked the people around him who had rescued him from prison, but no one answered his question. Su Jingfu was also uneasy. After sitting for a while, there was a sound by the door, and someone came in. Su Jingfu looked up. The person who came in was wearing a light green robe and was as gentle as an orchid. When he saw him, he called softly, "Teacher." "Xylan?" Su Jingfu was happy at first, but then he frowned. "What's going on?" Chu Xylan closed the door. "Teacher, you don't know, but Xiao Huijin has found the witness for the Mingshui case." Su Jingfu's heart skipped a beat, but he wasn't too surprised. His people had been looking for the whereabouts of the Luo brothers. They clearly had clues, but they suddenly disappeared from the face of the earth. At that time, Su Jingfu had already begun to suspect that Xiaoju was behind it. However, Xiaoju did things secretly, and he hadn't been able to find any evidence against him. Now that he was in prison because of Hirufei, Xiao Huijin would definitely not let go of this opportunity. Xiaoju had never forgotten about the Mingshui case. Sooner or later, it would be brought out for a retrial. Just the witness is not enough to convict him. Chu Xylan sighed. There are many courtiers who add insult to injury. Su Jingfu could only sneer. After being in this position for so many years, he certainly knew that sometimes victory or defeat could be decided in an instant. In the past, when he suppressed the old subordinates left behind by Xiao Zhongwu, he took advantage of the Mingshui case. Every dog has its day. Now that he was in trouble, his opponent certainly wouldn't be merciful. You mean, you think that the Su family can't make a comeback? Su Jingfu looked at Chu Zhao, and there was a hint of displeasure in his tone. When I was in prison, this is the method you came up with? Taking advantage of the situation? At this point, Su Jingfu was a little angry. Do you know that if you do this, the emperor will only be more biased toward Xiao Huaijin? You're not helping at all. Teacher, Chu Xilan stood beside him and shook his head. This student has no other way. Su Jingfu took a deep breath. You've always been smart. Why did you choose such a stupid method this time? Why did you rescue me from prison? Was it to save my life? My life is saved, but the Su family can't be saved. There's also Ping Ting and Madam. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. But now he couldn't go back by himself. But if he stayed here, people would only say that Su Jingfu fled for fear of punishment. Teacher, Chu Xilan said warmly, even if you don't rescue the prison, the Su family can't be saved. Xiao Huaijin won't give the Su family a chance to make a comeback. The fourth prince has already made his move. But you've made a bad move. You can protect me for a while, but can you protect me for a lifetime? Su Jingfu stared at the young man in front of him in exasperation. You've always been reliable. I've never been at ease with you. Why is it that this time? His words suddenly stopped. The person in front of him was his prospective son-in-law, his student, and someone he had watched grow up. He had always been by his side, studying and becoming an official. He was smart, gentle, and well-mannered. He was a truly talented person. In Su Jingfu's heart, he admired him very much. He didn't have a son of his own, so he groomed Chu Zhao as his successor. The room was silent for a moment. You did it on purpose? Su Jingfu asked slowly. His gaze was as vicious as a snake's. Chu Zhao smiled slightly. Teacher, we've already reached this point. This is the best way to do it. Su Jingfu's hands trembled slightly. I know that you're unwilling to give up and still want to make a comeback. But you're in prison and don't know that the situation outside has already changed. Chu Zhao's voice was still gentle. He continued unhurriedly, This student greets His Highness the Crown Prince. This is also His Highness the Crown Prince's intention. That idiot Guang Yan, Su Jingfu sneered. How could he think of abandoning the rook to save the king? I think it was you. He stared at Chu Zhao's face. You were the one who suggested it, right? Wow, Chu Xilan, you've been by my side for so long, but I didn't realize that I've raised a poisonous snake by my side. Didn't I learn this from you? Chu Zhao was not angry. He said calmly, It's because you taught me well. Su Jingfu had been in the officialdom for many years. This was the first time he experienced the feeling of being angered to the point of vomiting blood. Back then, when he was at daggers drawn with Xiao Zhongwu, he was not as angry as he was now. Su Jingfu understood Chu Zhao's intention. He was afraid that the prison break was fake. He wanted to make it seem as if he had secretly colluded with others to escape punishment. Then, his student would make a move and put justice before family. This would not only show that Chu Zhao was loyal to the emperor and patriotism, but also wash away the possibility of him colluding with him. He would also get rid of himself, a big problem. Su Jingfu still had a lot of evidence left by Chu Zhao that was enough to destroy him. More importantly, with Su Jingfu's death, the original Chu Zhao's clique would seek protection. If Chu Zhao could get out of this case, all the connections he had left behind would belong to Chu Zhao. He did not have a son. He liked Chu Zhao's temperament and talent and wanted to cultivate him as one of his own. He did not expect Chu Zhao to hide so deeply. It was as if he was going to die. Su Jingfu suddenly felt a wave of nausea. Chu Xilan, Su Jingfu called Chu Zhao by his name. I feel that I have treated you well. If I did not save you back then, you would have died in some courtyard in Count Shijin's residence. For so many years, I protected you, helped you enter the officialdom, and arranged everything for you. You actually repay kindness with ingratitude. You forget your roots and betray justice. You are a villain who repaid kindness with evil. Forget my roots and betray justice? Repaid kindness with evil? Chu Zhao smiled. He looked at Su Jingfu and said gently, "Teacher does treat students very well. However, in this kindness, how much sincerity does it contain, and how much is being used, teacher knows in his heart. There is no need to be too sincere. Otherwise, after a long time, I am afraid that even I will believe it." That year at the Su residence, Su Jingfu gave him a pair of boots and saved Chu Zhao from Madame Chu's hands. After that, at least on the surface, his 3 brothers and Madame Chu did not dare to be too presumptuous, and he was able to keep his life. For a period of time, Chu Zhao was really grateful to Su Jingfu. Later on, when he gradually grew up, Su Jingfu arranged for him to become an official. This seemed to be a good thing. A teacher would do his best to make arrangements for a student's future. In this world, not many people could do it. However, from the first day he became an official, he became Su Jingfu's chess piece. Su Jingfu's students were all over the way. Every student who became an official was his chess piece. Chu Zhao was no different from the other chess pieces. He killed people for Su Jingfu, unjustly accused, and won over people's hearts. He did everything. With Su Jingfu behind him, he was in front of others. He was a target in front of others, and he was always attacked in the dark. Once, he accidentally heard Su Jingfu talking to a servant. "Fourth young Master Chu is going to attend the banquet. I am afraid it will be dangerous. Sir, why don't you? Young people have to grow up in danger." His teacher smiled and said, "If he is not even willing to sacrifice his life, what is the point of raising him for so long?" Chu Zhao later understood that he was Su Jingfu's dog. He would bite whoever Su Jingfu wanted him to bite. The person who was bitten hated the dog, not the person who raised the dog. Did Su Jingfu not know that going to Jiang would be dangerous? Of course he knew. When he was in the Rundu, Su Jingfu was still wary of him. When Su Pingting fell in love with him, Su Jingfu could arrange his marriage on his own. Chu Zhao knew that if Su Pingting did not like him one day, or even hated him, Su Jingfu would abandon him without hesitation. "You played the role of a teacher and I played the role of a student. After playing the role for so long, I have forgotten why I was chosen as a student." Su Jingfu stared at him and said angrily, "It was because I pitied you." "Is that so?" The young man smiled. "Didn't you take me in because you saw that I had nothing and was easy to control?" He was a pitiful person who was bullied at home by his official mother and brother. He did not know when he would lose his life. He had nothing and had nothing to rely on. Once he received a favor, he would repay it 100-fold. Once he had the chance, he would do everything he could to climb up. He was too suitable to be a chess piece. He was too suitable to be used by others because he had no other choice. That kind and gentle teacher was just a facade he put on. His calculations and plans were hidden in those soft boots, and he was just waiting for time to slowly pass. Nails would slowly emerge from the boots, and unknowingly, they would stab people until they bled. But at that time, did he not plan? He knew that he was going to attend the banquet at Prime Minister Su's residence. He knew that the clothes Madame Chu made for him were as thin as paper. But he still wore those clothes. Chu Linfeng brought him to attend the banquet. Did he really not find any time to change out of the boots or at least pull out the nails? The Su residence was so big. Why did he have to meet Su Jingfu? He was a child who grew up in a brothel. He had seen women use all kinds of tricks to win the favor of men. It was an instinct of all strong people to pity the weak. Using people's sympathy and pity was a skill he learned to protect himself in those years. Every opportunity did not come easily. Every opportunity must be grasped tightly. He grasped it and finally changed his fate. Although the path back to his destiny was not very bright, it at least allowed him to live on for so many years. Su Jingfu used him, and he used Su Jingfu. In the end, he and Su Jingfu were the same kind of people from the beginning. It was just a pity that he had lost that pair of boots, he thought regretfully. They had really warmed him for many years. The light in the room swayed slowly. The wind outside was very strong. The windows blocked the wind, and it sounded like the howling of ghosts. The warm candlelight seemed to only make the room colder. Su Jingfu looked at him. He looked, and suddenly laughed in a low voice. He said, "Chu Xilin, but you're really good, teacher." Chu Xilan looked at him, his eyes still gentle. Like you, it's true that you sympathize with me. It's also true that you want to use me. It's also true that I'm grateful to you. It's also true that I want to kill you. He took a step back, and the outline of his face became clear under the light. It was clearly a gentle, handsome, and otherworldly face, but it also seemed like he had tasted all the sins of the mortal world, and there was a kind of cold pity. This student's schemes were all learned from teacher. It's just that the student has surpassed the master. What a good student has surpassed the master. Su Jingfu laughed, but his laughter was especially miserable. He asked, "Those outside are all your people? When do you plan to kill me?" Chu Zhao did not say anything. Such decisiveness and heartlessness. You're indeed Su Jingfu's student. He suddenly said, "What about Pingting? What are you going to do with her?" This old official, who had been fierce in the officialdom all his life, finally showed the weakness of an old man at this moment. He looked at Chu Zhao, his eyes even seemed to be pleading. "She really likes you? If you still have half a conscience, don't hurt her." "I won't hurt her." After a long time, Chu Zhao said, "As long as she's obedient." The lights in the room were brightly lit. Someone's voice came from outside. "Fourth young master. The pursuers are almost here." Chu Zhao looked at Su Jingfu. Su Jingfu looked back at him quietly. His eyes were filled with unwillingness, anger, and resentment. In the end, they sank into a sense of powerlessness. He was already old. When he dealt with Xiao Zhongwu at the Battle of Mingshui, he should have expected this day to come. Chu Zhao faced Su Jingfu, slowly kneeled down, and bowed to Su Jingfu. "The student union will inherit teacher's legacy. Teacher, rest in peace." He stood up and left without looking back. A few people who looked like guards rushed in. The sound of tables and chairs falling over could be heard in the room, accompanied by a low scream. Chu Zhao stood quietly. The wind blew at the corner of his robe, making his figure look especially thin. It was as if he would fly away with the wind in the next moment. In an instant, he thought back to many years ago. When he was about 11 or 12 years old, he went to Su Jingfu's residence to celebrate his birthday. Su Jingfu's students were all older than him. Many of them were already officials, and the gifts they gave were all gold, jade, and jewelry. He was the only one who hesitated for a long time. In the end, he took out a painting from behind his back. It was a painting of a pine tree. He had stayed up for many days and nights, and the painting was especially serious. He didn't have much money, and he didn't want to ask Chu Linfeng for money. After pondering for a long time, this was the only thing he could take out. The bones of a crane, the tendons of a pine tree, and the green cypress. At that moment, he really did think so. However, that was a long time ago. Not long after, two guards came out. One of them had a knife at his waist that had long been dyed red with blood. The blood dripped down to the snow at his feet like blooming plum blossoms. Chu Zhao took the knife from his hand. The knife was heavy. The man felt it was difficult to carry it. He didn't know how the thin and short girl could wield it so smoothly. He looked at the saber, grabbed the hilt with a backhand grip, and suddenly stabbed it towards his chest. The tip of the knife sank into his flesh. There was a clear pain, and it seemed to wake him up from his daze. The guard beside him was shocked. "Fourth young master." He waved his hand with difficulty, pulled the knife out again, and threw it to the ground. He covered his wound with one hand. Blood instantly stained his palm and dyed his robe red. In the next moment, the sound of soldiers and horses came from outside. He took 2 steps forward. Finally, his strength gave out and he fell to his knees. "Fourth young master. Fourth young master." The last thing he saw were bright torches and a large number of soldiers and horses. Chapter 244. Su Jingfu escaped from prison at night and escaped to a farm in the wilderness outside the city. His student, Chu Xilan, rushed over with his men. Chu Xilan was seriously injured in a fight with his teacher. He was now lying in a hospital bed, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. In one night, the wind in Shuajing changed completely. Su Jingfu's escape confirmed his treason with the enemy, as well as the crime of framing and harming an important court official in the Mingshui case. The Supreme Court's investigation of the case was very fast, and the entire Su family was arrested. The only surprise was the fourth young master of Shijin's residence. Some people scolded him behind his back for being immoral. Su Jingfu was so good to him, but he helped others to deal with his own teacher. Some people said that he was clear-headed. After all, the kindness of a ruler was more important than the kindness of a teacher. But now, he was lying in a hospital bed, and it was unknown when he would wake up. This made people sigh. It was said that Su Jingfu pierced his chest with a knife, and it was unknown whether he would survive. In the ancestral hall of the Shao residence, Xiao Jing and Xiao Ju stood side by side. Xiao Ju rarely came with Xiao Jing to offer incense. Most of the time, he came alone. Bai Rongwei was not feeling well 2 nights ago. She asked a doctor to see her and found out that she was pregnant. Half a year after Bai Rongwei married into the Shao family, something happened to Xiao Zhongwu. Not long after, Madame Xiao followed. At that time, Su Jingfu was very strict, and the entire Xiao family was in danger. Bai Rongwei, who had just been pregnant, worked hard and affected the fetus. She had a miscarriage, and it was at that time that she became ill. These years, she had been recuperating. She did not expect that as soon as Su Jingfu's case came to an end, Bai Rongwei would have good news. She did not know if it was predestined. Xiao Jing looked at the memorial tablet in the ancestral hall and sighed. It's been almost 7 years. I can finally put down one of my worries. Over the years, no one had deliberately mentioned it, but neither Xiao Ju nor Xiao Jing had forgotten about the Battle of Mingshui. It's been hard on you all these years. Xiao Jing smiled apologetically at Xiao Ju. The burden of the Xiao family is all on you. Everything in Shuajing is managed by Big Brother. Xiao Ju said blandly, how can you say that I'm the only one working hard? You're just stubborn. Xiao Jing shook his head and chuckled. Although I'm your big brother, I don't think I've ever done anything for you. You've never lived for yourself. His gaze fell on the light smoke rising from the Niao Niao. Now you can finally rest for a while. Regardless of whether he was thrown into the mountains when he was young, or later entered the Xianchang dojo, or finally took over the Nanfu army, they all lived for the sake of small family. Sometimes, Xiao Jing felt that he didn't understand what his little brother wanted. Perhaps it was because no one had ever asked him what he wanted. When he thought of asking, Xiao Ju had already grown up and was used to suppressing everything in the bottom of his heart. As the big brother, no matter how hard he tried, it seemed that he couldn't enter Xiao Ju's heart. Fortunately, if there was another person who could enter it, it wouldn't be bad. After the Su family's case, it's time to think about your matter. Xiao Jing said. My matter? Don't forget about your marriage. Now, this matter is a big matter for the Xiao family. Your sister-in-law is pregnant, so I'll ask her to put this matter aside for the time being and let me handle it. Xiao Ju was slightly surprised. No need, I'll do it myself. Su Jingfu's remnants are still arrogant. I'm afraid you don't have the time to deal with it yourself. Xiao Jing smiled. Don't worry, I have experience in this matter. I won't make a mistake. When your sister-in-law and I got married, I personally took care of it myself. It looked good in the end. At that time, Madame Xiao didn't want Xiao Jing to marry a concubine's daughter who didn't match his status. She couldn't persuade her son, so she left in a fit of anger. Xiao Jing personally took care of the wedding, from the wedding gifts to the wedding cakes. When he said this, Xiao Ju remembered that year when Xiao Jing stood nervously and carefully in the silk shop and personally picked out the cloth for the wedding dress. He couldn't help but lower his head and smile. Xiao Jing saw him smile and smiled as well. He said with some emotion, when I married your sister-in-law, I was still wondering when I would see you get married. I didn't know what the girl you would marry in the future would be like. Now that I think about it, he paused. Missy is really good. After a moment of silence, Xiao Ju said softly, I also think that she is very good. Huai Jin, Xiao Jing stood side by side with him. You have to cherish her. In the Chu Fu, Chu Zhao, who had been in a coma for 7 days, finally woke up. The first thing he did when he woke up was to drag his sick body into the palace and see the emperor, ignoring the wounds on his body that hadn't healed yet. At first, everyone thought that he was putting righteousness before family and wanted to cut off the Chu family's path. This time, he entered the palace to drop the last piece of Tu into the well. They didn't think that his purpose in entering the palace was to announce that he and Su Pingting were engaged. According to the time, Su Pingting should have been married into the Chu Fu. Since she was already married, she wasn't considered a member of the Su family. He begged Emperor Wenshuan to spare Su Pingting's life on account of Su Jingfu's past contributions. Loyal, righteous, and able to distinguish between right and wrong. This kind of young person was very popular with the people in power. Moreover, Chu Zhao's body hadn't recovered yet. His face was pale and stubborn. This reminded Emperor Wenshuan of Xiao Huijin many years ago. His heart softened and he agreed to Chu Zhao's request. However, Su Jingfu had committed a heinous crime. Although Su Pingting could be spared the death penalty, she couldn't escape punishment. From then on, she was reduced to the daughter of a guilty official. Of course, she couldn't be the young madam of Shijin's household. At most, she could be a concubine. When Su Pingting was brought to the Chu family, she couldn't stop crying. In just a few days, the Su family had fallen. Her parents were dead. All the people she used to be close to were avoiding her. And now, the only person she could rely on was Chu Zhao. Brother Xylin. When Su Pingting saw Chu Zhao, she grabbed his arm and cried, "Why did you only come to save me now? What happened? Why are they doing this to me?" The high and mighty young lady fell from the clouds into the mud overnight. Other than panic, she refused to believe that everything in front of her was real. Pingting, the man in front of her, still looked at her gently. "You will live here from now on." "What does this mean? I can't go back to my own home?" Su Pingting asked anxiously. "They've wronged my father. Brother Xylin, you must have a way. You must have a way, right?" Chu Xylin just looked at her quietly. Su Pingting's hand gradually loosened from Chu Zhao's arm. She took 2 steps back and the panic in her eyes faded a little. She seemed to have remembered something. She asked, "Brother Xylin, on the way here, I heard that they said that you put righteousness before family. When my father brought people to escape, you stopped them. This can't be true. They're lying, right?" Chu Zhao sighed. "It's true." Su Pingting's expression froze. After a while, she cried out, "Then did you kill my father? Why did you do this? My father was so good to you. He was your teacher." The beautiful girl's face was full of tears. She was always arrogant. She would either laugh without restraint or throw a tantrum. It was rare for her to be so weak and embarrassed. It was also at this moment that she did not look like Prime Minister Su's daughter, but like any other ordinary girl. Chu Zhao walked to her side, took out a handkerchief and wiped the tears on her face. If he did this in the past, Su Pingting would have been very happy. However, when she looked at the person in front of her now, his eyes were still the same as before. His expression was gentle and patient, but for some reason, it made her feel a faint chill down her spine. "I promised the teacher that I would take good care of you." He slowly took back the handkerchief. His tone was still the same as before, but it also seemed to be different. "I will definitely do it. Pingting, don't be stubborn. There are some words that should not be mentioned in the future," he said softly. "Be good. Everything will pass." He Yen and He Yunxing sat in the house and ate roasted sweet potatoes. She buried 2 sweet potatoes in the fine ash under the stove. After a while, she removed the ash. The sweet potatoes were roasted thoroughly. Before she peeled off the skin, she could smell the fragrance. When she peeled off the skin and tasted it, she felt that it was sweet and warm. It was so fragrant that she wanted to swallow her tongue. He Yen picked up a big sweet potato and threw it into He Yunxing's arms. The sweet potato was too hot. He Yunxing held it in his hands before he dared to eat it. "He Yen, you should eat less." As he ate, he reminded the person opposite him, "I heard that the military governor Xiao ordered people to make the wedding dress for you. It was made according to your previous size. If you eat like this, what if you can't wear the dress and can't find a new wedding dress?" He Yen threw a sweet potato peel at his head. He Yunsheng lowered his head and dodged it. She said, "Your sister's waist is slender. How can I not wear the dress?" "Don't worry. Anyway, I've never seen a girl who can eat as much as you before she gets married," He Yunsheng muttered. He saw that the sisters of the neighbors on their street were getting married. The other brides began to starve a few months in advance so that they would look light and cute on their wedding day. Only his family's bride was afraid that she would eat a mouthful less. She didn't have the slightest awareness that she was getting married. What should he do if this went on? He Yunsheng thought worriedly. If he went to the Xiao family, others would think that the He family didn't feed He Yen well. "You're so young. Why do you think so much?" He Yen lectured him earnestly. "Even Dad doesn't think as much as you." He Yunsheng took charge of the family at an early age. Sometimes, He Yen felt that he was more like Dad than He Sui was. He was not as cute as he was when he was younger. The Su family's case is over. Military Governor Xiao has nothing to do after this. He Yunsheng lowered his head and said, "The next big thing is to get married to you." "He Yen, why are you so careless?" He Yunsheng got angrier the more he thought about it. "Aren't you nervous at all?" The sweet potato was too hot. He Yen blew on it before taking a bite. He replied vaguely, "I'm not nervous." He Yunsheng was speechless. Okay, so he was the only one in the family who was nervous. He Yen looked at his worried expression and said with a smile, "Why are you thinking so much? Isn't there still some time before the wedding? Yunsheng, you're still young. You don't know how things change in this world. No one can predict what will happen tomorrow. Why should you add more worries to yourself? For example, the Su family was so glorious in the past. Who would have thought that there would be such a day?" He Yunsheng came back to his senses and said with a sigh, "That's right. That day at the celebration banquet, you and Miss Su were married together by the emperor. Now that your wedding date is approaching, Miss Su's marriage will never be completed in this lifetime." He frowned. "At that time, everyone in Shuajing compared you to Miss Su. They said that our family couldn't compare to the Su family. I was so angry. I'm afraid no one will say that now. After all, the Su family had fallen. Moreover, this accusation was extremely disgraceful." He Yen stopped chewing on the sweet potato. To be honest, Chu Zhao bringing people to place righteousness before family was out of her expectations. No matter how she thought about it, it didn't seem right. He Yen thought about it and felt that this might be a trap set by Chu Zhao. It was just that he closed the trap very cleanly and didn't have any evidence. On the surface, it looked like he chose to be loyal to the emperor. However, after thinking about it carefully, he didn't lose anything in this matter. On the contrary, he cleanly cut off his ties with Su Jingfu and temporarily won the emperor's trust. Other than lying on the couch for a long time. However, injuries could be big or small. It all depended on the doctor's words. After all, no one would purposely bring a doctor to verify whether he was really in danger. He Yen didn't want to think badly of people. Therefore, every time she thought of this, she quickly brushed it away and didn't want to think about it. Forget it. What did Chu Zhao have to do with her? Why waste time on people who weren't very important? He Yunsheng talked with her for a while before getting up and leaving. After He Yunsheng left, He Yen cleaned up the sweet potato skin on the ground. After washing up, she got on the couch. Speaking of which, she hadn't seen Xiao Ju since the day Madame He was buried. Prime Minister Su's case had finally come to an end, but it didn't mean that it was all over. The people related to Prime Minister Su and the people involved in the Battle of Mingshui couldn't be solved in a day or two. As for the Crown Prince, He Yan's heart was very heavy. The Crown Prince was definitely not a good heir. However, as a subject without real power, she couldn't influence the emperor's decision. She looked out the window of the bed. In the capital, a storm was coming. Just as she was lost in thought, suddenly, a cold light flew towards her. He Yan's expression turned cold. She subconsciously reached out to catch it. That thing brushed past her palm and slightly scratched her palm. He Yan looked down and saw that she had caught a long dart. There was something tied to the dart. He Yen was startled. She untied it and looked. Her face suddenly changed. What she untied was half a hairpin. The hairpin was in the shape of a magnolia flower. He Yen was no stranger to it. This was the hairpin she gave to He Xining. Since the last time she saw He Xining, He Yen was always worried that this girl would be disheartened and commit suicide. Every few days, she would ask Chi Wu to send something to the Wei family. There weren't many things, and they weren't very expensive. However, they were all things He Yen wanted. Sometimes it was a bit of jewelry, sometimes it was a piece of cloth. She wasn't very good at choosing things for girls, so she was very serious every time she chose something. She had asked Chi Wu to send this magnolia flower hairpin not long ago. He Xining heard that she liked it very much, so she wore it on her head. Why is it here? There was a note wrapped around the hairpin. He Yen opened it and saw a place written on it. It looked like a restaurant or tea house. Did someone kidnap He Xining to threaten her? But this restaurant or tea house was in the downtown area. Recently, there was no curfew. If they wanted to take action, why would they choose such an eye-catching place? He Yen thought for a long time. In the end, she was worried that He Xining would take the upper hand. She picked out a man's clothing from the box and changed into it. Chi Wu wasn't home today. Ever since Prime Minister Su's case came out, Chi Wu had started to get busy at night. She dressed up and sneaked out under the cover of the night. Along the way, she guessed and asked questions. Finally, she found the place written on the note. Sure enough, it was a tea house. This tea house was renovated to look like a small garden. From the outside, it looked more like a private residence. Not far away, there was a market square. From time to time, there were city guards patrolling. He Yen thought for a moment and walked in. Outside the small garden, there were two plain-clothed children standing there. When they saw He Yen, they didn't ask anything and only said, "Miss, please come in." It was as if they had been waiting for her for a long time. He Yen paused. She came in men's clothing. Her men's clothing wasn't foolproof, but it was enough to fool most people. However, these two children directly called her Miss. It was definitely not because of their unique eyesight that they could see through her real identity at a glance. She was afraid that the person waiting for her inside already had a deep understanding of her behavior. In He Yan's heart, she vaguely guessed who it was, but she wasn't sure. She also didn't understand why the other party would do this. The children led He Yen into the small garden. They went around a garden and entered the tea house. There was no one in the hall outside the tea house. He didn't know if it was originally deserted or if it was deliberately sent away. They walked all the way to the corridor. On both sides of the corridor, there were smaller tea houses. He Yen followed the children to the last one. The children said, "Miss, please come in." After saying this, the two people didn't care about He Yen and left. He Yen pushed the door open and walked in. In the tea house, the light swayed and the room was filled with the fragrance of tea. Behind the long table, sat a handsome man in a wide-sleeved robe. He smiled gently and said softly, "He." Fourth young Master Chu. He Yen heard her own voice. "What do you mean?" "I just feel like I haven't seen He for a long time and want to talk to He." He replied gently, not at all displeased by He Yan's coldness. He Yen raised her hand and showed him the hairpin in her hand. "Where is Miss He?" "Wei residence." He Yen was stunned. She looked at Chu Zhao again. After thinking, she threw the hairpin in her hand on the table and sat down opposite Chu Zhao. She looked at Chu Zhao and calmly said, "You lied to me?" "If not," Chu Zhao said, "He wouldn't be willing to come and see me." He Yen didn't feel it before. Now that she heard him say, "He," she felt uncomfortable all over. She paused and asked, "Then, fourth young Master Chu, why are you in such a hurry to see me?" Chapter 245. Chu Zhao pushed the teacup in front of He Yen. He Yen glanced at the teacup but did not touch it. He and I were friends when we were in Jiang and Rundu. Why are we so distant now that we're back in Shuajing? Chu Zhao asked with a smile. He Yen looked at him. "I heard that fourth young master was seriously injured a few days ago. Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Chu Zhao smiled. "But I'm happy that He is worried about me." He Yen frowned at him. Why did Chu Zhao's words sound like he was flirting? In the past, when they were in Jiangrandu, He Yan only took it as a joke and didn't take it to heart. Now that she and Chu Zhao had each been granted a marriage, even if the marriage between Su Pingting and him could no longer be held as scheduled, after all, the status of the two of them was still somewhat subtle. Could it be that he wanted to use her to deal with Xiaoju? He Yan pondered. The remaining members of Su Jingfu's faction had not been completely wiped out, and it was highly likely that they would join Chu Zhao's faction. In that case, Chu Zhao and Xiaoju were still rivals. If Chu Zhao wanted to use her to deal with Xiaoju, would he use his beauty to trick her? That was too much of a sacrifice. Seeing He Yan's strange gaze, Chu Zhao paused for a moment. After a while, as if he had seen through her thoughts, he shook his head and laughed. What is he thinking about now? Fourth young master, He Yan said seriously, where did you get Miss He's hairpin? Young Mistress Su? Chu Zhao said, I saw that He took good care of young Mistress Su, so I ordered someone to take her hairpin. This was not a gentleman's action, but I just wanted to see He. He asked, He is very sincere towards young Mistress Su. The matter between the He and Su clans was ultimately caused by me. I happen to have the same name as Miss He's elder sister who passed away. It's fate, so it's only right for me to take care of her. He Yan answered smoothly. Chu Zhao took a sip of tea and sighed. If that's the case, I really envy Miss He. What are you jealous of? I envy He for being so concerned about her. He Yan. She now understood that Chu Zhao was clearly flirting with her. Moreover, compared to before, he was flirting with her in an unbridled and open manner. He Yan lowered her head and looked at her own hands. Was it because she hadn't shown her kung fu in front of others for a long time that people had forgotten that her fists could smash Shirtu into pieces? Fourth young master, you didn't ask me to come here to talk about this, right? He Yan asked. If you have something to say, just say it. Chu Zhao smiled and restrained his expression for a moment. He treats me like an enemy now. Is it because of military governor Xiao? He Yan looked at him and didn't say anything. It's almost the new year. Chu Zhao looked at her with a gentle gaze. There seemed to be a hint of sadness in his eyes. He will be marrying military governor Xiao soon. Fourth young master, do you want to congratulate me? Chu Zhao shook his head. No, I want to ask you, are you really going to marry military governor Xiao? He Yan. Of course. Can you not get married? He Yan was simply baffled. Why not get married? Because, he looked at her with a smile, I like He. He Yan. In her previous life, when she was the second daughter of the He family, although she had interacted with many men, no one had ever confessed to her. Even when she was married to Su Zhiheng had never said the word, like. She didn't expect that after her rebirth, so many peach blossoms had bloomed. Putting aside the rotten peach blossom Fan Cheng, whether it was Mu Yi in Jiang City, Xiaoju now, or Chu Zhao now, He Yan had some doubts. The daughter of the He family was quite beautiful, but she couldn't be considered an outstanding beauty. How could she be so attractive? Xiaoju and she were fated to be together for 2 lifetimes. What about Mu Yi and Chu Zhao? They hadn't even spoken to each other a few times. Wasn't it a bit too casual to say that he liked her? Fourth young master, these kinds of words can't be said casually. He Yan composed herself and politely replied. I'm not joking. Chu Zhao looked at her gently, but his gaze was very serious. When I saw He at the Liang Province Guards, I already liked He. He Yan couldn't help but have goosebumps. She thought that she still wasn't used to hearing such straightforward words of love. Thank you for your love, fourth young master, but, she said, I already have someone I like. Military Governor Xiao? Yes. He Yan answered readily. He is always so direct. Chu Zhao was still smiling, but his gaze was a bit dim. He asked, Why do you like Military Governor Xiao? But He Yan was stunned. She never knew that there was a reason to like someone. Liking someone was just liking someone. Why should there be a reason? If she had to give a reason, it was probably because Xiaoju was really too good. When he saw that she wanted to eat loquat, he secretly stuffed loquats into her bag. He had the brothel mother change the liquor to sweet rose dew. When he knew that she didn't have enough strength to lift a knife in the academy, he purposely chose a knife master. When he saw that she was seasick, he gave her seasickness medicine and lied that it was poison, and so on. What was strange was that he seemed to have never been treated gently by anyone, but he seemed to know how to take care of people. After thinking for a while, she smiled and said, "I wasn't very popular in the past. There weren't many people who were good to me. So every person who was good to me, I firmly remembered it. Later, I found out that the people who were good to me were all the same person. How could I not like him? I will also be good to you," Chu Zhao said warmly. He Yen looked up at him. Fourth young Master Chu, we are not the same kind of people. There was silence in the tea room. Chu Zhao's eyes were lighter in color. This made him look more gentle than others. But now, his eyes were like fluorite that was about to shatter. They were so fragile that it made people's hearts ache. I am very sad to hear you say that." He Yen said, "I'm sorry." Although she had never been good at dealing with intimate relationships between people, He Yen didn't have much struggle in her heart when she said those words to Chu Zhao. Chu Zhao and she were not the same kind of people. This was an undeniable fact. Because of her previous life, she preferred people who were frank and open. She didn't like people who kept 30% of their words and 70% of what they said. They were always unpredictable. In the end, they were adults. He Yen didn't want to make the atmosphere awkward. He smiled. "Moreover, I am about to get married." Fourth young master asked the emperor to spare Miss Su's life. Fourth young master doesn't know, she said in a relaxed tone. "I'm a jealous person. In the future, the person I marry will not be able to have any other woman in the inner courtyard other than me. Xiao Ju also paid a price to marry me. What's so difficult about that?" Chu Zhao looked at her and said seriously, "If a he is willing to marry me, he will be the only one in my backyard." Pa! Before He Yen could say anything, there was a sudden loud noise. The door behind them was kicked open. Shameless boasting. Someone sneered. He Yen turned around and saw Xiao Ju walk in with an ashen face. Compared to Chu Xilan, his entire body carried the chill of the wind and snow outside. What was even colder than the wind and snow was his expression. He Yen thought that if it weren't for the fact that the city guards were nearby, he might have killed someone. Military Governor Xiao came so quickly. Chu Zhao sighed. He stood up and smiled. "I almost succeeded." He Yan's expression changed. "Almost? What almost? Don't say things that will cause misunderstandings at this time." No. He Yen hurriedly explained. "I didn't succeed. I failed from the beginning." "Really?" Xiao Ju didn't even look at her. He only stared at Chu Xilan. There was a knife hidden in his eyes and his expression was mocking. Military Governor Xiao, in front of a lady, it's best not to be too fierce. Chu Zhao chuckled, then looked at He Yen again. "What I said to he today, every word and sentence is this Chu's heartfelt words. If a he changes his mind, I will definitely think of a way for a he. I also sincerely want to marry a he." The last sentence was like honey that had been brewed for a long time. It was so seductive that it caused ripples in people's hearts. However, this ripple didn't even have time to reach her lips before it was cut off by someone's sword. The long table was smashed into pieces by the autumn drink. The teapot and cups on the table shattered on the ground. The sound was especially clear in the night. Xiao Ju's figure was tall and slender. His fingertips were slightly white as he held the autumn drink. His tone was calm, but it also seemed like he was brewing anger. He said indifferently, "Do you think you're worthy?" Chu Zhao looked at him with a smile. The atmosphere was on the verge of exploding. The city guards were not far away. He Yen guessed that if the commotion was any louder, it would attract people. Previously, when Xiao Ju used the autumn drink as the prize on the Heavenly Star platform, there were people who scolded Xiao Ju for being blinded by lust. If this matter were to spread today, wouldn't her reputation of being a femme fatale be confirmed? The heavens took pity on her. She didn't do anything, so why did things become like this? He Yen made a prompt decision. He grabbed Xiao Ju's sleeve and dragged him out. At the same time, he turned to Chu Zhao and said, "It's too late today. Let's not talk anymore. Fourth young Master Chu, goodbye. Chu Zhao smiled and said, okay. He Yen dragged Xiao Ju out of the tea room. The two plain-clothed children at the door had already disappeared. After taking a few steps out of the courtyard, Xiao Ju suddenly flung his hand away. He Yen was stunned. He saw that this person had already walked in another direction. There was no doubt that he was angry again. However, this time, He Yen could understand. She was about to get married, but she was caught trying to steal someone else's girl. If she were in his shoes, she would also feel unhappy. However, He Yen also felt wronged. She chased after He Xining and saw Chu Zhao. At first, she thought that Chu Zhao had something to say to her. He Yen was still thinking about whether she should beat him at his own game. However, she didn't expect Chu Zhao to confess to her in such a mushy way. She didn't expect this to happen. Forget it. Anyway, second young Master Xiao was angry again. She had to calm him down first. Xiao Ju, slow down. I can't catch up, He Yen called out to him from behind. However, this time, Xiao Ju didn't slow down like before. It seemed that he was very angry. He Yen caught up with him from behind. When she reached him, she turned around and hugged him by the waist. Stop, don't walk. Xiao Ju was hugged so tightly that he couldn't walk. He didn't look at her and turned his head to look elsewhere. His expression was still very cold. I'll explain to you, He Yen said hurriedly. What happened today was definitely an accident. He came to me with Xining's hairpin. I thought that something happened to Xining, so I went to see him. I didn't expect that he was just tricking me to come out and talk to me. I definitely didn't meet him in the middle of the night. There's definitely no affair. It would have been better if she didn't say the last sentence. The moment she said it, the surrounding atmosphere became even colder. Don't be angry. It's not good for your health. He Yen reached out and rubbed his chest. You're so young. You're so angry all the time. Be careful that you don't get sick. Xiao Ju blocked her hand and frowned. Don't touch me. He Yen clung onto him like a rascal. Unless you're not angry anymore. Xiao Ju took a deep breath and looked down at her. His tone was very cold. Even if he lied to you, why didn't you leave immediately after knowing that you were tricked? I didn't know what he wanted. I thought that he had something important to talk to me about. He Yen explained. It's so late at night. Since you're already here? He looked at He Yen in disbelief. Since I'm already here, of course I have to ask you clearly. He Yen said righteously. How would I know that he was here to talk about some irrelevant things? Then he muttered in a low voice, he scared me to death. Xiao Ju sneered. I told you to stay away from him. I know. He Yen pointed to the sky and swore. I'll stay away from him in the future. Of course, who would have thought that Chu Zhao would have such an idea about her? Just thinking about it made her hair stand on end. Xiao Ju's expression softened a little. He Yen looked at him. Seeing that he didn't seem as angry as before, she asked, But how did you know that I was here? She exclaimed. You got someone to follow me again? Xiao Ju said angrily, I didn't follow you. I followed Chu Xilan. He Yen said, Oh, you care more about Chu Xilan than you do about me. Look at how magnanimous I am. Why am I not angry? Xiao Ju stared at her without saying a word. I was joking. He Yen smiled. Suddenly she thought of something. When did you arrive? She was stunned. You arrived from the beginning. The young man raised his eyebrows slightly. He Yen, what did you hear? She asked tentatively. What should I hear? He Yen didn't say anything. What should she hear? If Xiao Ju came early enough, wouldn't that mean that Xiao Ju heard everything between her and Chu Zhao? Including her unwavering confession of her love. He Yen let go of his arms and turned her head. She wanted to slap herself hard. Although she herself didn't care about her reputation, now that she thought about it, how many times had she confessed to him? Front and back. She wasn't a confession machine without feelings. How could she be caught every time? It was embarrassing. But this person was too evil. He just listened outside. If she acted closer to Chu Zhao, would she be accused of being an adulterer? She couldn't defend herself. Yan's thoughts were running wild. She heard him ask, "What are you waiting for?" Seeing that Yan was looking at her, Xiaoju paused and said, "Let's go back." Yan made an end sound and walked 2 steps before stopping. He looked at him suspiciously and said, "Xiaoju." Xiaoju stopped and turned to look at her. "What's wrong?" "I thought about it carefully. It doesn't seem worth it," Yan said. "What's not worth it?" Yan blinked. "How many times have you heard me confess?" "I've never heard you confess." "Xiaoju, what?" Yan said it confidently. Don't blame her for being calculative. Now that she thought about it, Xiaoju was reserved. She always beat around the bush. Yan didn't understand her words. Anyway, she took a step forward and said, "You didn't say you liked her." "Liked her?" He looked at Yan and asked. Yan nodded. "Lady he called Yan's name, which made Yan quiver. "What do you want to confirm?" Yan was speechless for a moment. To be honest, she just wanted to take advantage of Xiaoju verbally and listen to him say something nice. However, Xiaoju was so serious that she didn't know what to say. She was about to find an excuse to brush him off when the person in front of her took a step forward. The young man's face was close to hers. His face was clean and beautiful. When their eyes met, there seemed to be an inexplicable emotion in his deep black eyes. It made her blush and her heart beat faster. Yan only managed to say one word before he was interrupted by him. He took a step forward. "The first time I picked loquats was for you. The first time I taught her swordsmanship was for you." He took another step forward. "The first time I helped her apply medicine was for you. The first time I gave her candy was also for you." He took another step forward and pressed on. "The first time I coaxed a girl was for you. The first time I helped her lie was also for you. After thinking about it, the first person I liked should also be you." Yan was forced to the stone wall behind her. She couldn't retreat. She raised her head and met his smiling eyes. "Lady are you sure now?" Yan listened to her heartbeat and forgot why she asked this question just now. Her gaze moved from Xiaoju's eyes to the corner of his lips, and she suddenly wanted to kiss him. She did so. She tiptoed and moved closer to the person in front of her. Xiaoju was startled at first, but then the smile in his eyes grew wider. He leaned forward slightly and was about to touch her. Shuo City is really degenerating. How can people who are gay be so brazen? I can't watch. Hey, let's go. What are you looking at? I want to see who these 2 people are. Maybe I know them. The 2 drunkards pointed at the 2 of them and stumbled away. Yan was shocked. She forgot that she was wearing men's clothes at night for the sake of convenience. In the eyes of others, it was naturally 2 men who were whispering sweet nothings to each other. But why were there people wandering around in the middle of the night? Weren't they afraid of bumping into each other? She was annoyed. She didn't know if it was because she almost kissed Xiaoju but missed it, or because she was accused of being gay. She was depressed and buried her head in Xiaoju's arms. She didn't raise her head and said angrily, "I'm sure. I'm very sure. Okay, let's go back." Xiaoju lowered his head and glanced at her. He reached out and tried to pull her out, but she hugged him very tightly. After a while, he could only helplessly let go and chuckle. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.